All right, so you're going off this one to that, and then I have Mike Harris is coming. He'll be on that. So
I can do that. Is it in your sage folder? Or not?
oh, where?
Just kidding.
Broken mirrors, I don't know if you recall. I hear 2 or 3 contacts today, we have to put into puffing and spinning all over the tree.
What am I? Oh, I'm mirroring? Not mirroring. It's up on there.
Yeah.
Don't get nothing there.
Yeah. So what I thought, so you want, I was thinking,
No,
what,
yeah, I can't. That, I can't get to the PowerPoint. It's up on the projector, but it's not. It's not here.
you, so, okay,
I'm just trying to make it big. I'm just trying to get to the PowerPoint. So,
okay,
makes sense?
yeah,
Will that work up there?
yeah. So,
Oh, all right. Well, you got the mouse.
yeah, here, hold on.
I just saw it. There it is.
There we go. We got the slideshow.
Click
All right.
remote is that.
I just had the mouse. Sorry.
Want me to go over there?
Yep.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for those of you that could make the tour. And I'm going to turn it back over to Joe DeGroni.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody. Great to see you again. I hope some of you had the opportunity to go on the tour. I sent the deck prior. There were a couple small things we changed, but it's nothing that was the end of the world. If you had a chance to look through it, we obviously have a lot of ground to cover tonight. And I know we went real long last time, but we'll be efficient as we can, but we want to be as thorough as we can too. And if you did take a chance to be able to thumb through it, just try to be as deliberate as possible about how this aid thing works and how the spaces work and how things get counted. Because we know when our meeting last time, we wanted to be absolutely clear as we can about how all that works. And like I said, we have a lot to get to. Is this gonna, Josh, am I gonna? Oh, good. And we have, who many of you do know, I think from the prior meetings we have with us, Taylor Wolf from BCA Architects. He's going to go through the BCS. Remember, we didn't meet in October, so we can get all that work done. So he's going to talk about the survey they just did of the current, all of the current building conditions in both buildings. And Eric Roderick is with us as well from Schoolhouse, who's been leading a lot of the project management up to that point with the previous project too. Is Paul here? And Paul Moy, I'm sorry. Paul Moy as well from Schoolhouse. And I think Mike is on the line.
Yep.
And Mike Harris from BCA Architects as well is on the Zoom. So again, just we're going to walk through a lot of this work. And I'll just appreciate your patience as we go through it. I really want to be as deliberate as possible because I personally want to make sure I addressed all your questions from the last meeting. So I chunked things out a little bit so we can talk about each space and we can talk about how calculations work. I think it's important to see the work Josh did to his credit with state ed to be able to get more aid than the enrollment really said that was qualified for. So I want to have that conversation as well. And just to remind people that when we set the plan out, we were dealing with these 3 interrelated problems, for lack of a better word, that we're trying to solve about the conditions of our building, of both facilities, dealing with transportation, and also dealing with the athletic fields as well. So then again, we'll talk about how those state aid calculations work. Taylor will come up and walk through the building condition survey. And then after that, we'll talk about immediate priority repairs. Remember, in September, we talked about kind of 4 options of what, where things could land in terms of long-term planning, and then next steps as well. So just as a reminder, and I noticed the 2 on the district goals as I was walking through the building coming in. In a perfect world, we want to have some draft facilities plan, long-range plan, in draft form around February for presentation to the board in the spring. And that's a conversation, we'll talk timeline at the end of this as well, as we continue to narrow the decision-making process. Also, as a reminder from the last meeting, all this information is posted on the website. There is a warehouse, for lack of a better word, where we're keeping all of the prior information about the projects. It's all up there. It's the repository for everything that was done before and all the information that we have going forward that anybody can access as we move through that. So since the last meeting, remember, we left the September meeting. We said we weren't going to meet in October because we wanted to update the building condition survey. It was due to be updated next year. We accelerated that process so the committee can have the best information. All other things being equal, which is required by state education department every 5 years, go through the facilities, note areas that need immediate improvements or areas that need to be addressed in terms of maintenance and systems that are out of date or systems that are coming to end of life and everything related to that. So we did a full review. Thank you to Taylor and the team at BCA for doing all of that work and preparing that report. We talked last time about different sites. We're still looking at that, and to do more work on that, I think the committee has to have a discussion about where things land and what might happen with regard to where anything can occur, because that will really, the site drives a lot of costs, and we don't want to candidly invest into all the work was done before, and I think it was 17 sites that were determined. The previous site was found to be the best site. We end up with an option that people want to be at a different site, and I know site was a consideration, and we talked about that in September about what are these big variables that we were dealing with, and site was one of those. If we want to look at a different site, we want to have a different discussion about that to narrow it down, because the site infrastructure drives a lot of cost. So we still have all of our prior work, but until we get more direction about maybe where we want to go, we reevaluated what we have, and we can just turn that switch back on if that's something the committee wants to continue to pursue. We'll also talk about, especially in terms of how it works with state aid program review and how those counts cost into getting state aid. So the options going forward, and again, these are the 4 we kind of talked about last time, and I still think that they're on the table. Again, a new school, the athletic fields, and the transportation facility on a new site, which would be essentially, if we use the existing site, looking at revising what was proposed before. It still remains the most efficient, the least disruptive, and candidly the most cost-effective option as well. It resolves all 3 of these issues that are kind of commingled. It's a holistic solution as opposed to point solutions. And as I just mentioned, if we look to a different site, it's going to have different costs. And until we have a conversation about what that may or may not be, we don't want to really dig into heavy to start having to figure out what costs and site logistics are. There's utilities, there's a million things that go into site work, accessibility. So until that gets narrowed down, if that's something the committee wants to consider, we can do more work in trying to narrow that down. Yes, sir, please.
When is that discussion going to start?
I think it's going to.
You can't do it at the end and try to do it.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is we ended up at the prior site because it was the best solution, right? But if we end up in a place that says, oh, we're going to fix buildings, and maybe we just want a different site for a transportation facility, then different sites come into play. Does that make sense? So it kind of depends on what you want to put on it, drives a lot of the site discussion as well.
So that site discussion was having the new school at a totally different location than where it was.
And that is definitely still on the table as well. Absolutely. That goes, I mean, to be able to do that, the survey of the prior, all the site options led to the conclusion that from an efficiency standpoint, and a site standpoint, the prior site was the best location.
And 1,000 people said no. 1,000.
I'm putting the homework forward for the committee to have that conversation. And to Sam's point, they say, it's part of another variable. No, we want a new school or a new whatever it might be, find another place to put it, then that will be the charge. That'll be our next step. Again, renovations, another solution is renovating either site with additions to be able to accommodate all of the students. The third option was to renovate both buildings to maintain both of them and have students again at both buildings. And then the last one, which we'll talk about at the end, is another option of what if we just did the necessary work to maintain the facility based on the work that has to be done. So to keep both, what's the minimum amount of work to keep both buildings in operating condition? So renovations versus new construction, and we'll come back to this later. When you renovate, or we're looking to renovate, it's not addressing some of the other, I mentioned holistic solution versus point solutions. Renovations in either of the current facilities does not address the athletic fields. It doesn't address transportation. We'll talk about later if we redo the leach fields, and there's different septic work and other things that have to happen at either site if that takes place. Also with renovations comes a different set of challenges, and we'll make sure all this is on the table before we dig into it more extensively. Doing renovations in occupied space is very, very challenging. Extends the life of the project, increases the cost of the project. Got to figure out where we're putting kids, where we're doing things. So there's a lot of logistics that go into renovated space as well. So as we look at things and talk through things, when you build new, we can have kids in a place already versus when we renovate, we want to figure out how we can manage kids and how you can stage a project over a longer period of time because the building's occupied. So state aid calculations. In simplest terms, and I think this is the best way to talk about it, when we talked last time about the what is aidable versus what is not aidable, I think that's really important. So I'm approaching it strictly formulaic because it's literally a worksheet, that you fill. And I put copies in there. I know they're hard to read in that, but I mean, it's filling how many kids do you have for elementary, enrollment drives a lot of the calculation. So ultimately, your building aid units are determined and they're multiplied by the construction cost index. And the construction cost index is determined by the state. So we're using, I think it's updated again this year, but that's something we'll have to look at if that's the case. This is the 2022 number, which was the original one that was part of the planning, if I remember correctly. Tell her if I misspeak on any of that, just please, 2022, I would, yeah, just please feel free to chime in. So it's different for elementary. It's calculated differently for elementary, secondary, and special ed. And it's driven by enrollment for elementary, and it's driven by type of space for secondary. And it's literally a worksheet. So this formula gets us to a point that says you will get aid on X amount of your construction. So first is the elementary, and it's the most straightforward. You know, New York State says you can have 27 students in a classroom. And that's what they go in terms of their units, which they go on. You say, well, I don't want to have 27. We have 23 first graders, and we want to have 2 sections. And they say, you can have 2 sections, but we're not going to pay you. We're not going to aid you on the other. They'll aid you up to the 27. So it's the number of pre-K through 6th grade classrooms, and we don't exceed that. So this model was built, as you see, 16 classrooms. Each grade level was built 2 deep, right? Even though in some grades, could have had 1 classroom, but the model was built 2 deep to 432 BAUs. The meening that Josh had with State Ed, they turned around and said after extensive negotiation and those kinds of things, it would aid the district up to 623. So for lack of a better word, they're giving you additional aid on top of what you qualify for. Yes, ma'am.
So my question regarding that is, that was the last project, which was rejected. If we submit another project, first of all, it would have to go through state ed again.
Correct.
There's no guarantee we'll get those additional units.
There is no guarantee, but I think we are going on a good faith based on what they have offered. They have no reason not to, especially since the district tried so hard to get something forward that ultimately did not succeed. There's been nothing on your end that says we did not try to be able to move forward. Could they go back and say, no, there was one-time shot, you're out? Sure. I'd be surprised, of course, lightning's gonna hit me now, because of the work that's gone into it, and they're well aware, it's not like they don't know that you're coming off a merger, and you've had facilities work, and you moved the project forward that wasn't successful. So if they don't do that, they're saying, we appreciate you weren't successful before, but now we're really gonna make sure you're unsuccessful, right? So I don't think that it's a good position for them to be in. So we'd have to, you resubmit, we have to have the conversation, all of that has to happen. So believe me, there's no promises. There's definitely no promises. Regardless, so they aided it up to 623, and I know that's really small at the bottom too, but we were only supposed to be aided to 432. So they built in about another $3.5 million of construction costs that would qualify to be aided. And again, like I said, it's just a worksheet. That's all there is. I just want to put it in. I just added it to your deck so you know that. That's the process. It's plug and play. A little different at the secondary level because it's based on spaces and pupils. Science labs get aided different than classrooms. The programs different in secondary, as opposed to you have elementary students, you have an elementary classroom. So it's a little bit different in there how it works. Regardless, they agreed to add, we were at 410, I believe it was, and they agreed to go up to 526. And it's another 3 and change million that they agreed to add to aidable expenses. So in the grand scheme of things, regardless of where it landed as a package in terms of aid, we really ended up, as far as the elementary and secondary program had, pretty far ahead for what they were going to allow to qualify to be aided. And again, the sheet of how the calculations work. It's all on the state of website, state of facilities planning website. And lastly, special education, they allowed up to 125. It was 8 students before that. Another 811 class was considered, and they were in there, so they're allowing up to 125 pupils. The cost for special education students is higher because the cost to educate them is higher, so they use a different number for that, 58 and change. 125 pupils, 58 and change, $7.3 million of aidable space. And for new construction. So when we look at, I don't have that in front of me, the enrollment is, I can go, that the enrollment is the upper right-hand circle. I believe it was 404, if I remember correctly. And down in the left was ultimately what they're going to come back in the units they're going to aid us for. So when you take the prior slides that we have here, the aid that they're going to allow, 11.6 million, which again was 3 and change higher than what we technically qualify for. 15.4-ish for secondary, again, which was higher than the original BA, what the worksheet BAU calculations are. New special education, the maximum cost allowance, the MCA for total construction, is 34 and change. That is the number you can build that you will get aid on. And if you remember, we talked last time, and I think this is, again, I want to be really clear and make sure that everybody's on the same page before we go on. When we talked last time, it was 20+ million in unaidable. We had to, why is it aidable? This is what's aidable. So a $35 million, 34 and change $1 million project will generate the aid for what you're eligible for. Yes,
And these numbers are all based on 2022 numbers?
in terms of the cost, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there any chance that this is changing since then?
Everything always changed. The cost index don't change a lot. Taylor, I don't know if you know or if Mike knows, but it's not like they're constantly updating.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
The neighborhood, if anything that moves a little.
Shit.
Yeah. The biggest area, but there's cost of borrowing now too. Separate conversation when you extrapolate what the real cost of the loans are. But this is a very, very strong neighborhood. That 34 is not going to turn into 50, and it's not going to turn into 10. You know, that's very confident of a range around that, without question. Without question. So again, all other things being equal, the 34 and change $1 million project, take your aid ratio, and that's the money it would generate. Yes, sir.
So moving forward, like, will they take into account if we have an increase or decrease in students? Because there's been 2 years, so there's kids coming up through pre.
Yeah, when you apply, and I don't know when the last 5-year average enrollment was submitted. You submit a 5-year average enrollment when you submit the project. Candidly, I don't know if the enrollment even down, Josh. I mean, it could work to a disadvantage too.
Our beds numbers this year, I believe we were at 403.
403, so it's the same. And they take a 5-year rolling average, so it's not you're up 1 year, right? They don't want to look at outliers.
You don't have to do it each time.
No, you don't have to do it each time. Yeah, they take a 5-year average. So if anything, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, if you do a new project, we would submit the enrollment data along with that as well. And we just added a year on it, which is the same, so that really wouldn't matter in terms of money.
Yeah.
Thoughts, questions? I just want to make sure we had the dissonance about what's aided and what's not. So if that is what qualifies, you will generate your aid on a project up to that expense. Yes, ma'am.
Bus garage and athletic facility, where do they fall in
The bus garage is separate, and that's in a total aid slide later. And I think I'll have to look to Mike on that. If I remember correctly, it was another $4 million, I think. For the expense for the garage, which generates aid in and of itself. And part of the problems goes back to site too. I know we got a lot of moving parts, but if you do the athletic field somewhere else, it's not with the school, it's not gonna get, it's all out of pocket. And it's interesting when I was looking at a lot of the homework that I was doing to really try to make sure I understand all the moving pieces. You're $3 million apart on an aidable, which I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you're $3 million apart on an aidable expense, but your fields aren't there, you're gonna spend $3 million on the fields anyway, right? Plus or minus, because you gotta find a site, you're gonna have to construct them, and they don't qualify for aid. That's another upside of keeping everything together.
And the bus garage?
Bus garage will qualify for aid on a different site. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I heard that clear, that the athletic fields, if it's not part of the campus, there's zero.
Will not qualify.
But the bus garage can be.
Yes, yes, yes. And again, Mike's on there, don't correct me if I'm wrong, or Eric, but the model we built later has the bus garage aid. Fields are, it's extra, it's auditoriums are extra, right? They don't, unless it's proper with things, it doesn't get aided. Remember, transportation aid is that's a whole separate thing to state that. Trans is looked at as an essential component of doing the business, and it's looked favorably in terms of. So, and I don't have this, I'm not gonna be able to read it from here. Let me have a hard copy, Josh. I don't want to misspeak the numbers.
That's all right. Thank you.
Just to chime in, I think Mike was muted on the call here, but he just sent me a message that said since 2022 the cost index went up and then went right back down slightly. So we're
Probably right where we started, right?
Yeah, it's pretty close to where
Pretty close, yeah. Like I said, it'll always fluctuate a little bit, but it won't be any showstoppers. So the next is the renos and the addition at either campus, renovating the campus and doing an addition, be about a 30,000 square foot addition to accommodate the rest of the students. You can see at the bottom, the total number for this is 26 million and change. The BAUs are calculated different for renovations and new spaces. So renovating an addition generates less aidable expense than building new. And I think that's important to remember. Renovation and the addition generates less aidable expense than building new. So if you stayed at either campus, renovated, put an addition on, it's about 26 million that's eligible for aid. The model we talked about before was 30, almost 35, 34 and change.
On those new renovations, if it's attached to the old structure, is that a higher aidable than what the main structure gets?
The renovations and new construction are different, yes. So again, the MCA, which I just summed up on the prior slide, new facility, ground up, 34.3 plus or minus, again, is eligible as an aid, as to be aided versus 26.5. So a new facility generates another $7 million in aidable expenses. And this slide is a look, essentially our summary, and I think this is the important piece of it. And I put in the box because, you know, and our last slide is next steps in decision making, but in the red box, the top is what we just talked about, but the red box at the bottom are the combined costs, and that was our third option of what if we keep both campuses fully open, renovate them to a like new status, and basically have both campuses fully renovated moving forward. You know, it's a $41 million project where 26 million is aidable. And I just want to point that out now. As we talk about decision making, it's the least cost effective. It's the longest. As you look to decisions, I know those are all important parts of it, but to keep both campuses open and to fully renovate the schools to current standards is the most expensive and the longest way to be able to do it, because you're still only eligible for that 26 million in aid. You know, you still only have 400 students, right? You still only have these tangible things that don't change, right? It's just how they get applied in different ways. Any questions? Well, I'm sure there's questions, but just on the aid pieces that we just did. Yes, sir.
So, I'm sure I could find it here, but you probably can pull it up a lot quicker. The new construction portion of Mountain View, do you have a number on that? I'll leave it on to you right there.
A separate number?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
The addition at Mountain View, do we have a breakout of just the new construction number for that?
I believe we had it in one of the last presentations in the last round. We can find it.
We can get it for you. Yeah. We can get it for you. When the age calc, it was all put together. And again, we do it, it's about 30,000 square feet to move the elementary students over. Yes, sir.
This is a two-part question.
Sure.
I understand the cost index going forward could ebb and flow up and down. Can you remind me of what the grace period is where that sort of state, rundown and formula that got us to the last project total? How good is that? How long is that good for?
We had 10 years, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, this is your expertise, we had 10 years from the merger, we're 5 years in.
No, I wasn't very clear then.
Okay.
So when we formulated the last project and put it out for a vote, that had been approved prior by the state. How long do we, now that the vote has been voted down, is there anything that was done in that project that gets to carry over? Should we choose that one? I'm not saying we will, or does that all have to start again?
Tough question, and I got not a great answer for you. And unfortunately, it's, and I don't know how far, did we have site concept? Did we get any approvals from SED in terms of drawings? I mean, there were no.
We sent the preliminary drawings, the packages.
So the preliminaries were approved, which They're currently running, and I gotta double check, and Eric, maybe you know, I thought it was 6 to 8 months on architectural right now in mechanical review.
They are, and, right now, we're seeing the third-party option somewhere around half of that time.
Right, so they just, man, what's it been, 4 years maybe, they were so back, they don't have the people at state ed review these projects, can't be honest. They don't have architects, don't have engineers, that can do this work. So several years ago, they contracted with City BOCES out in central New York to be a third-party reviewer. Now, because the cost change used to be 20 grand, I think. I mean,
It fluctuates based on budget.
yeah, I mean, there's a cost, so it's very interesting. You can get into the state ed queue, which now is running 6 to 8 months out to at least start the architectural review. I'm sorry for the song and dance on this, I just want to be thorough on the process. But there's an expedited review process now that you can pay for that can cut that in half. But we could come back if we have preliminary and we've run the aid numbers. And based on the circumstances of the last one, I think we could try to go in and push a little bit to get things into the pipeline. But you still will need the full approvals of the plan, of the architectural review. You still need your full MEP review, and you'll still need the fiscal review sign off on everything.
Okay, so just going back then. So it didn't appear that our preferred collective comments last time around led us to this idea of another vote on the same project. And as was pointed out earlier from the audience, well, why would we even consider that if there was 1,000 people that voted it down? I don't disagree with that necessarily, except to say, well, there's a different committee. It's a different time. We're going through different exercises. At some point, we'll have to decide on some sort of preference, whether it's going to be a new site with a smaller building with hopefully a smaller total, or it's going to be a preferred renovation and sort of get that down into a more manageable number. And if we go through those exercises this month or next month or the month after, it's still very possible that the most efficient and the most cost-effective and the most desirable outcome is that which we started from. It isn't for certain. I'm not suggesting that it will be, but it could be. And so again, we haven't gotten the actual preferences either voted upon or decided upon as to where to start these kinds of more in-depth talks. But there is a scenario to which you go through the new, right? And the reno,
right,
even if they're scaled back, which presumably we would be doing so we could afford it. And we still end up finding that scaled back version of a reno or a new spot is actually more expensive than what we started with, which then goes to my question as how long do we get to go back and say, oh, well, that might have actually worked out better.
3 years from now, that's not going to work, and there's too much sand through the hourglass anyway. And I think part of that, and these are all great points, because the committee's going to have to make a decision. And I'm calling these first few months fact-finding. My job is to really try to outline all of this information, which I hope I'm doing to your satisfaction, so you can make informed decisions. So I'm still turning over rocks, making sure that the committee has the information they have to make a decision. But to your point, you have to make a decision, and it can't be 3 years from now, because you have to address current facility. Remember, we'll get to this later. You're doing $1 million project on this roof right now. Every year, it's going to be millions for something, and million for something, and millions for something. Right, and from my bank book, right, this is like your car. Am I putting 10 grand into my car that's worth $1,000, or am I putting 10 grand into it so I can get another year out of it and then have to put another, right? So all of that, to your point, and all that background, I agree with Corey. The committee's going to have to make a decision about direction to continue to inform us to do the work. But I look at this still as from our role, fact-finding, making sure you're provided with everything to make an informed decision. But gonna have to fish or cut bait, to your point, sooner than later, because sand's off through the hourglass with the project, right? I mean,
but even if we make a decision as to what to focus on, we might be working on that for a period of months or even a year or more. And then find that that's not going to be workable for our needs, our pocketbook, and a positive vote.
Right.
right? So, I mean, it doesn't, just because we choose one at some point,
Sure.
doesn't mean that that's gonna be the end result, because we don't know how that's gonna all look. right?
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be more about, which will, when we get to the rest of the pieces, the committee about the constraints of the guardrails of the decision making. You know, we talked about site before, and there's 15 of you, or maybe turn around, we get done with the meeting now or next month, whatever it is. Joe, we're not going back to throw them, I don't care, find somewhere else. And we've already done the homework, we know where all the sites are available. So after that, it's like, we can go here and it's gonna be X, or it's, you know, so what are the guardrails gonna look, so the decision making continues to narrow? I mean, it's a lot, it is a lot. And because of the scope and because of the variables, and to your point too, which I think is really important, and because of time. You know, a lot went into, the good news is, all the work you've done before it's not lost, and it wasn't for nothing, right? It's informed all of this. We didn't start fresh 3 weeks ago trying to figure out these calculations. We didn't start fresh 3 weeks ago trying to wring every nickel of state aid we can out of anything for any project. So we have all this work. But I also think if we go back 2 years from now and say, remember back in, you promised us, right, that there's a memory that goes with it, because we certainly don't want them to say, well, you know, there wasn't enough due diligence to be able to move a project forward. So I think these are all interrelated variables that are going to have to form decision making. There's no question. No question. Yes.
So at some point over the next months that we're going to be doing this, will we have an opportunity to just collectively as a group interact rather than?
No, 100%, no.
A tuned audience?
And whenever you want to, that is your prerogative, absolutely. Like I said, the September and now, and the point of doing the BCS was to make sure you have all of the most current information that we have. And candidly, maybe when we look to next steps, that's our December conversation, because outside, I don't have much more homework in terms of making sure you have the cost in front of you, you have what it looks like to go to different places. You know, my goal, which again, I hope you find satisfactory as we get closer to it, is you have what you need to have an informed conversation. As opposed to, well, what if it was new? You know, how much is the new? Well, here's what the new is. In the drawings you have, these were the spaces for elementary, these were the secondary, and this is how it was aided. And then you can have that, please have.
Hopefully as we go forward, we'll have asked enough questions to
Yeah.
get that specific information. And then I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know that personally, I'd like to interact with everyone on a one-to-one basis.
No, I think that's certainly, after tonight, you're gonna have everything to have that conversation, an informed one among everybody, and everybody has the same information. So, yes, ma'am.
So I just want to go back to one thing you said
Sure.
about that we already know, it's been investigated, we already know what other possible sites are out there, and I don't know if I agree with you. We know what was available then. I think we still would need to research if we consider another site. We still need to research what else might have become available since then. And I know at some point earlier, we asked the community, if you know of anything that's available, please let us know. I don't know that we got much of a response to that, but I certainly heard, well, nobody checked this site and nobody checked that site. But when we asked for those suggestions, we didn't
Never
get them.
came up.
So there may be other sites out there.
I agree. Let me reframe that. We have our place to start from. We have all the ones that were found, were evaluated. And I think if you say, let's look at more sites, then we start that process, that outreach process. I don't know enough to look to the team, I don't know if the rest of them came to realtor, if we engaged with someone, but if it's the committee's pleasure to move forward with something in a different place, then we will look at every place possible. No question. Yes, sir.
Again, it seems that process ought to be sooner than later, and that you're giving us numbers from previous project on building conditions, basically, and what it's going to cost is basically all there. We've got numbers to what it's going to cost for the new construction. The only difference that we have is the site, and that site has already been, that project has already been done. So I think we need to
Right, but we got good ballpark of what the
We
site
can
might
start
be.
that conversation up.
Yeah.
Where those sites might be, and let's get moving forward with that.
Right, and let's,
Parallel with
I agree, when we can close with, if that's something the committee wants, then we'll get that iron hot. But, you know, the flip side was, if the committee wasn't moving in that direction, you know.
I'm just raising my hand, yes, I think we ought to, be the committee, we ought to be doing that.
Because there are sites that may have been cost prohibitive at the time, but we've got to factor the cost in regardless of whether we feel it's cost prohibitive or not.
I mean, questions on the floor, Sam.
The voters basically turned down a new construction. I mean, the site doesn't really matter. It's not gonna change the cost that much. I mean, they voted it down based on their tax increases. I mean, the voters don't want that. If you were to put something in front of them, it's another new school at a different location, they're gonna vote it down again. I mean, that's not something that's gonna pass.
Well, that was part of what we talked about in September too. It was, is it site? Is it new? Is it
It's not
cost?
site. I
Is
mean,
it?
You looked at the exit survey basically says people want it at the Mountain View. It's the majority of the people want to renovate Mountain View, put everything in.
But not everybody got the exit survey, and not,
Yeah, but you still get a majority of the
absolutely,
people.
absolutely.
I mean, if we're doing a disservice, if we're gonna keep putting forward a new school, I mean, it's cost prohibitive. People don't want that. You have $26 million to put into renovating a new school. Let's start there and see where we can put $26 million and what we can get for that. I mean, do we know what that cost is? I mean, you guys have estimated costs in here for renovating the school, but it's not detailed. I mean, what exactly is it?
Well,
is there a full breakdown? Because no one
Yeah,
ever gave a full
we have
breakdown.
that information when they went through the costs behind that. And again, to continue on that path, I think we're getting to the point where we need to be informed what our next steps are too, which is what the committee may want to do in terms of the decision making. If they want, you want to talk about what that cost looks like, fine. You want us looking for more, what space might be available, where land might be available?
Is the
Fine, we can do
26
that as
million
well.
available for renovating, or is it just for the addition?
I'm sorry, what was the first part?
The 26 million for.
It's all
that's
in,
you.
all in.
That's renovating and addition, it doesn't really matter?
No, it matters because both went into the calculation.
Okay, so there's a certain percentage that is for renovating versus addition, and you guys are planning on 16 new classrooms and, okay.
Yes.
We also have playing fields.
Well, those are the other parts of the equation too. None of that is, that's not carried there.
So none of
And
that cost is reflected in the
That
numbers
current number,
that put
that current
everybody
number, right.
on one campus.
And there's
And there
septic
is
too.
still the
Yeah.
cost of a bus garage, and there's still the cost of athletic.
Has anyone explored the golf course? I know it's been brought up online and pretty heavily rejected against people, taking away the golf course, but I mean, that's prime spot for athletic facilities. Is that actually available? Can the school claim eminent domain over it? Can the town, can that happen? Or is that something that's not,
The town could rule on that. That property was donated not specifically as a golf course. It was donated for public, private use, or public use for the benefit of the community.
yeah.
The municipality owns the golf course.
I mean, would that be considered on-site since it's right there? Has to be contiguous from what the
previous 5 years of
exercises went through.
Yeah, and I think too, what's important, again, I don't want to get ahead, or this is all very, very important, I appreciate it. But if that is a road, again, if that's something we look at, we also have to talk, you're gonna lose the fields behind Mountain View too, because we had to deal with septic and the leach back there, because it's all gonna be moved. Right, so there's always pieces to that once we start looking in that direction. But as a committee, if that's something we want to talk about and consider after we get through this, that's in the end, when we get to next steps, where's our charge to help keep the process moving forward? Yes.
So I feel like we can do some concurrent planning. My wish list for the concurrent planning, whether it's for a standalone new building or whether it's for a rent out, is to probably get down on paper 5 or 6 or 8 different sites that are now on the market that worked before. There's one in particular in Wadhams, for example, that's 120 acres. It's flat, there's no trees, it has views of the high peaks. There's a farmhouse that could be separated and sold. You could keep 100 acres. You'd have 2 points of entrance from that area. It wouldn't be in Elizabethtown or Westport. It would be in Wadhams. It would be somewhat neutral. I'm not saying that's the one, but I'm saying there probably are a lot of other properties available now that weren't, that would be a lot more central, a lot more cost effective. The other part is that this idea of, we went through probably 3 or 4, at least 2 major cutbacks in terms of what was gonna go into the new building. There was a few different layers. If we need to trim 15, oh, the prices just went up 8, we need to get down another. Like, I would like to know, I guess, too, what another layer of reduction in terms of a more consolidated, more affordable, standalone building. Is it, I'm gonna have to say, it's gotta be possible to come down a little bit with the resources and with the overall cost, because we've already heard that message, as you said, the taxpayers aren't willing to pay for that type of robust project. So again, a different site with lower cost, a smaller building with lower cost, essentially located, everything that brings the efficiencies down, for me, is still something that I need to have more information about.
Right, and I think when we get to the next steps part, we'll have the conversation, at the end of the conversation as a committee and talk about what you want us to do that homework on. Because as a committee, there can't be 15 of you or so, 15 different things we're gonna try to untangle, right? I think to the point earlier, you have to have the conversation at the end of this and talk about if everybody agrees with that, or if everybody agrees with that.
Well,
Or
I'm
if
not saying
everybody agrees
15,
with
but what
both.
about 2? What if we got it down to 2?
Well, yeah,
Two
yeah,
of the
or
most
as I
cost-effective.
said, if everybody agrees with both, or 3 things, but they're, well, again, it's the information to be able to narrow what those decisions might be, is really where we're at.
And to follow up on what Tom just said, I would like to see that same consideration for the addition renovation to Mountain View, because when we first got that package, the majority of the previous committee did not feel that we needed everything that was in there. So what can be cut back from that plan as well?
And if that's something that everybody agrees on, we'll look at, that's absolutely something we can do, we can have that turnaround too. Right, this is all good, because this is the decision stuff as we come through the funnel, right? Which, after we look at these things, hopefully, it's not making that decision, it's throwing away the decisions that we kind of don't want. That's kind of the lens I'm bringing to the table, where by process of elimination, we say, like to your point, you're not going to spend $41 million out of pocket, right? Unless I'm misinterpreting everything that's happened. And if we're not going to do that, let's set that one aside and keep working towards what we want to look at. What is the solution set?
Joe, one more question.
Please.
I need parameters. So like, if we need to try to make a new school work, how many acres do we need to have the athletics, the transportation? Like, we could go through a list of all these properties, but I need to know, is there like a state mandated?
There is, for all of them. We can provide, if we get to a place where we're going to do some broad shopping, we'll make sure everybody has that. We'll get it out there and say, do you have a site that is A, B, C, and D, and you're interested in selling?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's driven by, that's a really good point, because it's driven by enrollment, there's required outdoor spaces, there's required acreage around all that. So that's a really good point. So we don't want to have 400 people showing up and say, well, I got 3 acres, they might be able to put a softball field on, right? That's going to no advantage to us.
Joe, if we
Yes.
find, if a parcel of 100 acres or whatever might be acceptable is out there, are we going to do the research and factor in the infrastructure cost to
Yes.
make that a viable, usable
Yes.
place?
Yes.
Just because we can buy it for this, it may cost us $3 million to get water and power, et cetera, out to
I
it.
wonder, Taylor, do you remember how big or Eric
14
Was 14?
acres of developed site, yeah.
developed, right? So the one that was rejected is 14 plus or minus, and that's all the fields, that's a building, that's transportation and associated all the hardscape, all the parking and everything else. So it's a 14 plus or minus, and then to your point, we find it over here, and if there's no way, and somebody, I just went through this on 2 different projects, it was a year fighting with National Grid to get service in, but it was the only place we had to be, and that's a year of your life trying to make that happen. So all of those considerations are really important.
The majority, certainly, I think that's.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
2 things I'll be brief. One is, will hard copies of your presentation be available for the public?
Yes, and September's is as well. Everything's on the website. Yeah.
Okay, but you're not handing any out?
No, I don't have any copies. I mean, you can have mine if you want it after.
Okay, no. And secondly, I felt like to go along with what this gentleman was saying, the vote the first time on draw was hugely, that was a strong message, 379 to 1008. brought up, you can spin your wheels all you want planning for a new school, and maybe that would go through. But I feel like that's a lot of work by these people if the sentiment is the same, which I believe it is. I could very well be wrong. And I wonder, wouldn't it be beneficial to do a good community survey? Because, that's been done before. There was one done following the vote, which only about half the voters, if that, completed. And I think it would be, if you don't have a lot of time, if you mess up this time, you only have only 5 years. So wouldn't it make sense to go out to the voters, because no matter what you plan, that's who has the out, and ask the question, is this still strongly something, what do you want? Because that's where it's gonna end if when it goes to vote. And secondly, when the first time around, we looked at building new or making current facilities equal to a new facility. And there's a huge leeway in the middle. And I think there's a lot that could be done that would make our facilities perfectly fine without having a $400,000 speaker system, $1 million bathrooms. I think that kind of stuff lost a lot of support by the public. And I think if you want the support of the public, first, you should be getting information out to them other than just on the website. And secondly, maybe it would make sense to have a similar survey before you embark on all this. Let's look at this site and let's do this. And, if there's still a strong sentiment against building new, or maybe people have thought maybe that does make sense, but doesn't it make sense before you start all of this to ask the question of the voters? Because in the end, that's a lot of work by these people. They went through the committee, spent years the first time around, and look what happened.
Oh, I think if that's something the committee wants to consider, you certainly can. But I also think in my experience in doing that, when you get the options, is the best way to be able to weigh in. And that's where you decide, is it gonna be this? Once you get through everything, look at this, and look at this. Is there a preferred option? Because if you do it the other way, it just snowballs incredibly. It's tough to manage. But if that's something the committee wants, once you get down to, okay, we're deciding we're gonna do A, B, or C, or whatever it might be, and you wanted a different form or some other way to gather information, that's something we can talk about. But it's the will of the committee. Yes.
Just my own opinion on that is that I do agree that a survey of the community would be wise, but I don't think now is the time to do it, because you're asking people to make a decision without information.
Yes.
So it's an uninformed decision until you can compare the options and you know what's involved with each of them. I don't know that.
I agree.
I don't know that a survey.
I agree. Like I said,
is-
when you do it, you need to be at a point where you've made decisions. Like you're really down to, you're gonna renovate and do this here, or you're gonna do this, or you're gonna do this. And otherwise, like I said, it snowballs. It's, you're all earning your money tonight through service to make those decisions to get there. Volunteer to serve, you're part of this process, you're leading it for the community. And other input can go through there, but I think once you get the decision-making part, you have to have something to opine on as part of everything too. And right now, again, all we're doing is we're providing information currently. And then when we get to the end of this, we'll talk about the decisions and next steps.
Fair to say that the information that people may have in their minds now from our previously proposed project that didn't work out, fair to say that most everybody that believes what they were hearing at one time or another may not be inclined. I guess where I'm going with this is that we need to share. We did a terrible job sending along the facts and marketing the development of the project as we went. I feel, I'm think one person did it. I think collectively, we failed to share the facts. So if we start doing a survey, to Shira's point, when people don't have the facts, we have a very misleading moment in time. I always said before, I wish we could have some darn choices. I wish we could say, we've got, this is the renovation, this is how much it's gonna cost, this is how long it's gonna get you into the future. This is the standalone project, this is how long you're gonna get it, and so on and so forth. But we never were able to make that idea of a choice, not only just for us, but for the voters, because really, you know, you start talking about wanting to spend the least amount of money on this next up and coming project. That's all fair and fine and good, but most people aren't going to do that if they know it's only going to get you 15, 20 years. Most people are going to say, well, if I'm going to spend half or more of that same money, I want to get at least my 50, 80, 90 years out of it. So again, these are all very dynamic things. I still, as I think back to the last project, I don't know exactly. I think there were some things referenced in that last comment about $1 million bathrooms and the 400 offices. I don't remember anything about $1 million bathrooms in the last thing around, but there were a lot of things shared about the last project leaning into the vote that weren't anything that I had heard about in the 5 years that I was on the committee. And so I'm here on the committee to do work. I think it's going to be hard work, and I think we got a lot of it to do. So I don't think we should apologize for us being here, because we're all here because we want to make this right, one way or the other. So I feel like this is a really interesting moment in time to start figuring out.
Yeah, I think
how to share facts.
That's great, because it's nice to see these evolve, and this is how, I know this is a tedious part of the process, but you have to have your facts, right? You're the committee, you have to have your facts, so we can inform people from there. But I think you're getting to the point of when you focus on the decision-making, then it's the whiteboarding of the details for each decision. So everybody has the same set of details that they're working from, and what it means to answer all of those questions becomes part of what the options look like in final decision-making.
I mean, one of the biggest false statements was we could fit all these students at the Mountain View campus, which, I mean, every educator here has said, no, you know, we do not have the space for special ed and everything else that's involved with that. I mean, other people could talk to it more than I can, but that is one of the biggest things pushed online, is that we can fit everyone in Mountain View. Why can't we fit everyone in Mountain View? I mean, I think people need to be told why we can't fit all the students there.
And if that becomes part of it, I'm sorry, if that becomes part of it, that goes into the definition and the substance, the facts. Again, I'll use the word fact because I think it's a great word to use, behind the solution set. Right, yeah, you could swear peg around Holem all day. No, I've been there, we've all been down there. I don't want to be in that basement. If I was teaching, I wouldn't want to teach down there. If I was a student, I wouldn't want to be down there. But different conversation, right? Then you get into the academic program, which is like part of what we're going to talk about in the BCS doesn't address any of that. This is all meat and potatoes. Your boiler's bad, right? It's that stuff, right? You're leaking. It has nothing to do, unfortunately, which we talked about at length. It doesn't bring that other lens. So when those solution sets come up, the second part of that T-chart is, yeah, you can, but this is what's not included, or that's the effect of doing that. I think that's a really good point. And it won't, when you get to that point, pros and cons of each part will have to be part of what that solution is. But that's a really good point, and it's an important lens to look through, because ultimately, building for the kids are the people that are teaching the kids, right? Where do we want our students to be? What spaces do we want our kids to be in? Go ahead, Sam.
There is, you know, when people talk about putting all the students in one location, you're talking about a different generation that you know here at school and what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I would be one of those that say, yeah, almost 400 in this place, 355 or something like it used to be in this school. You walk around here, and you've got counselors here, 4 or 5 here, you've got county coming in with a counselor we haven't added to 5. People don't know that. They don't know what's going on in the school. That could be your responsibility to try to get that kind of information slowly out there into the community so they know the requirements. And
I think that we should.
I think that's.
Well, I mean, what's the maximum number of kids in a class?
I can't.
That's the
Well,
biggest driver.
I think you're perfectly positioned to, because I think it's people.
I'm gonna be gone in 2 months. So. So, no, I'm not. I'm not, I don't want to say something wrong and have.
No, but Sam, Sam,
Call me and say, what'd you say that for?
but Sam, to that point, you do have like, people listen to you. And so if you get this information
I'm
and
disagreeing.
you disagree, okay. But if you have one person that you can talk to, I mean, that's like, I think that's the point of what we're all doing is like.
But I don't know, I totally know what's going on. And I'm not wanting to misinform.
No, I understand that. How can we make it clear? Because I don't understand everything either, and that's, I think everybody, we live in a towns with intelligent people. And so, but there's so much information here, like, thank you for providing it all, but like, good God.
It's a ton, I mean, because there's so many moving parts, you know, just the point, which we'll talk about in a second. No, you don't have to renovate every space. You don't, you can just fix, which we'll talk about, you can do the infrastructure, and that's fine, but that's conversations among the committee as well, to what degree we want to do things, and the hardest thing is, this is generational stuff, you know, no pressure, but this is it, right? You're not gonna revisit this and say, okay, you know, when you have that one shot where you can generate this much on an aidable project, what do you want the approach to be on that? Like you said, you look what kids, we do all of those kinds of things. But it goes back to mission district and what you want for the kids in the district and what the community wants too. And I think that will continue to evolve as we look at what the solutions might be. On top of that, and we all know we're dealing with site, we're dealing with, you know, still from the original merger, like you all have a lot on your plate. I'm not envious at all. I've become incredibly intimate with this, believe me, very intimate. But I see you know, I see so much opportunity. With all the hours I spend with this, I see so much opportunity. Because again, it's generation. Nobody's going to have this in 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. This conversation is going to happen again. This is generational. This is generational for the district, generational for the people that live here, or may ultimately live here. But above all, it's generational for the kids that go here. Like, this is it. Like, no pressure. Again, believe me, no pressure. But that is really a big part of, which is why you are so painstakingly thinking through every decision, which we are going to collectively have a conversation.
But Sarah gave a statement, which I've used previously at the very first meeting. We also have to look at wants versus needs. And I've reached out to a friend of mine, an architectural firm that I've done business with other projects. Sent him some rudimentary drawings that I had made available to me on the footprint of the current Mountain View School. And talked to him about situations that I know what I used to know, I don't know them anymore. Windows, daylight, etc. For different rooms that don't require it, different classes that don't require it. And he's putting together something to get back to me for my own purpose.
Sure.
And which I'll be glad to share when I finally get it. But the one thing he told me was, he chuckled as he said it. He said, you can come up with an ideal plan where you can use every single square foot of that place and not have to put another spot of an addition on it. He said, but the pushback from the faculty is going to be incredible. And that's something that, how do you go against that?
And is it the right solution too?
Oh,
You can square peg, exactly. You can square peg round hole. Like I said, we could make kid fit. Somebody, I think, when you just meant how many kids can you put in a class? Remember, we talked about 10 slides ago, 20, the answer's 27, that for 8. Or you can cut that elementary school in half. Josh, I don't know what the grade level enrollments are currently, or almost, you can cut it by a third at least, right? But then you're saying it's okay to have 27, up to 27 kindergarten kids in a class. These are district decisions. Again, I'm just trying to help walk everybody through the process. Right? Do you want less elementary schools? That's going to reduce, they're going to change their aid number on you. Don't get me wrong, because they're aiding you. You got the bonus round, right? They're going to say, if you're not going to use those, we're just going to, there's no question about that. They're going to take them back. To our earlier point, will they honor it? Yeah, so, I mean, you could scale down, it's going to change your aid. We can look at it and see what, you know, if it's really 400 BAUs, what the aid on that is versus the extra, and you're kind of getting aided on extra. there'll be a trade-off, I'm sure. But to the point is like, okay, it's 20, you're gonna get up to 27 kids in elementary.
But that's a state number. What is the teacher's contract say?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So if a teacher knows better than I do, I want to say, is it 22 and 24? 2022? Yeah, so again, correct
And then
me.
for the special ed, their state ed number.
Yeah.
Right.
I believe kindergarten through second grade, the
Exactly,
number is
state
22,
ed.
and then third through sixth is 24.
Yeah, so primary is 22, intermediate is 24.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna have a job, or you're always gonna be on that cusp. You're always gonna be on that teachers for grade. I mean,
How many extra students if it's teacher vacant?
I believe I would need to confirm the contract language, but I don't believe, I believe that has been a way for us to sort of get around that in the past, if needed, to prevent like a third section, but I don't think that I don't think we've explored that to get down to one
So like I
section.
said, I don't know what's in the
Yeah.
contract, our previous
Yeah.
contracts, they had a number.
Yeah.
That number, if there was more than that, they had a.
Yeah, sometimes it's capped, sometimes you're able to look at that, but that's not uncommon at all, not uncommon at all. Another constraint to look at too. But then again, if you have a building that can't do it, then you gotta look to find a solution on it. Is it an A, is it an EA, is it whatever it might be, which you don't have another class. But again, these are all pieces to what go into the decision making. Yes.
Sometimes I find it useful and helpful to talk through some hypotheticals, sometimes when we get caught in one track or another and getting a little bit of a different angle. And so I would just say this, is that let's just say in a perfect world, we found enough space in Mountain View to renovate the entire building to fit all of our needs, and we can make that happen. So we move all the students over to this building for 4 years while it gets built or it gets renovated. You educate as best you can with some trailers out in the
You're
field.
suffering the short term,
And
right?
you're suffering the short term, you put everybody over there. Now you have a brand spanking new renovated Mountain View campus with maybe the old bones, but the new infrastructure of safety, security, health, wellness, airflow, everything that everybody needs. I don't think the teachers are going to have a hard time with working in that environment eventually. But then the question again becomes big picture stuff. Like, so then where are we going to put athletic fields? What do we value? Do we want a basketball? Do we want a baseball field? Do we want a soccer field? That's pretty like low level for most of the schools, even the ones that don't have a lot of money. Baseball field and soccer field. All right, where do you want to put your buses? Usually people have bus garages to put their buses in. So where does the contiguous acres fall around the current Mountain View place? Okay, so maybe we could have bought the Teachers Learning Center, the little postage stamp next to it, or buy the thrift shop and tear that down, and whatever it might be. The point is that I think there's a lot of different scenarios to play these things through. In the end, we're still looking for efficiencies. We're still looking for the most amount of state aid. And we just simply never found any sort of mapping or strategic plan that would allow for athletic fields, bus garage, and a renovated Mountain View campus to work, even though we knew probably in our hearts of hearts that was the newest, most capable building to be renovated. I mean, this is 93 years old, so 93 years ago,
Oh, no, right.
a whole bunch of people sacrificed their higher level of taxes to create the school for the last 100 years for many generations. And so we're at a pivotal point. We're not going to be looking at this in 50 years or 100 years. We're going to be looking at this, if we don't do anything now, in 10 or 15 years, and we're going to be kicking ourselves for not doing anything if that's what we do.
Right, no question. And I think that becomes part of the solution set where we do that. Remember, you have these three interconnected problems. You solved that one. You didn't solve that one. You didn't solve that one. And here's the cost to continue to do that. Absolutely.
You also have around, this building is surrounded by county property. So it's easy enough to get county property and put a field out there.
So in that case, we'd put everybody over at Mountain View and then renovate or build new here and just expand the grounds.
Well, you're talking about Mountain View, I'm talking about Lakeview,
Yeah.
and what could happen here.
Sure.
Make it a
Very
You
important.
have two places.
Yeah, very important.
Even taking over Fairmount. I'm not saying we do that, but I'm saying there's plenty of land around this facility to make soccer fields or add to.
It all becomes of what the solution set looks like, which we're starting to walk towards. It's muddy. It is. That's just the process. But I think the communicating and the fact part, which I hope everybody feels like you're more comfortable with facts and numbers and those kinds of things too, around the solutions will be important once we get to that point. Because it'll address all those pieces. Because certain solutions don't solve everything. So when you look at the solution set, what can have the most appeal from a variety of perspectives? Which we'll get to shortly. So let's go through, Taylor, I'll bring you up if you don't mind. And again, this is the lens on this, because it's important, because it goes to what was raised before. This is architects and engineers going through a building and saying, these are the things that need to be addressed. All right, it doesn't have to do with, this isn't about any academic spaces, this isn't, there's no art room, this is about the bones and the meat and potatoes of the buildings, of both of them, and what we'd be looking at in terms of renovating everything, and then a list of which we asked for is when PC had put everything together. There's also a minimal approach to this too. What are our priority things? If in fact the committee turned out and said, you know what, just fix things enough so we keep that, fix the end of life stuff, we keep both of them standing and operating. There's a number on that too. That's the low cost option. Go ahead. You got a roll too.
Yeah, so as Joe mentioned, we went through, since the last meeting, we did some field work for the building condition survey. You all have this in front of you. This is going to be a general overview of sort of the major components. In the near future, we're going to share a report with plans and locations. We'll get to that in a bit. But I want to hit on some of the major items. And again, this is health and safety, end of life, infrastructure between the grounds, outside, building envelope, building interior, and mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, fire alarm systems.
Can you
and the like. Yes.
Thank you.
The first slide is just sort of what is a BCS, what is a building condition survey? And it's put on by SED, and it's every 5 years your building goes through this evaluation. Up until 2020, it was every school did them the same 5 years, but now they're on a rolling clock. Yours is actually due to be completed next year, but because we're going through this process, we wanted to get ahead of it. Again, it's architects, engineers, walking the buildings, the grounds, and finding deficiencies. We put that together into a big master document, and we'll give you locations, we'll give you cost estimates, and then that is used to start to plan the next project or projects. Why now? Again, I just mentioned we are due next year, but because we're going through this process and we have options in front of us, we want to make sure that we have all of the data. And why do we do it every 5 years? Well, we've heard a couple times today, but this building is over 90 years old. The average school building in New York State is over 75 years old. We have systems that last 25 to 50 years. So over time, you have to start renovating spaces, replacing systems, especially mechanical and electrical plumbing systems. Both campuses, Lakeview here, were in the 1930s for the original portions of the building. You have parts that were constructed in 1954, and then the latest was in 1997. And then at Mountain View, it's 1957 and 1951, sorry, and 2002. We'll start with Lakeview because we are here. And again, general overviews. I hope you can see these photos. They are in front of you as well, but the order of this presentation is the order it gets submitted to the state. So the state has a form. On there states the location, which in this first instance would be site features, the recommendation, the deficiency, the remaining useful life, the vintage, and then the proposed solution and the cost. Walking the grounds with our landscape architect and engineers, we found a lot of pavement, sidewalk deterioration that needs replacing. This can be a safety concern. We have a swale over by the athletic fields and the playground it's really starting to deteriorate. The swale itself is destabilized, so the recommendation would be to add some riprap and reconstruct that swale. There's a photo, I'm trying to zoom in on my iPad, but you can't see that. The top right corner, drainage upgrades, so there's clogged catch basins. There's a photo of the asphalt and concrete that's cracked, it's starting to overgrow, becomes a maintenance issue. the athletic fields in the middle of the bottom row. Resurfacing that play field, I'm not entirely sure how much it's used, but the clay infield is sort of overgrown by grass and dangerous to children playing. So these are the types of items that we pick up that the state's looking for, that we add in to the to our overall building condition survey document. We go on to exterior, we do the same type of survey. In this case, a lot of the major items are masonry rehabilitation. So you have cracked masonry, you have efflorescence along the building. That's the white moisture coming from the actual inside of the cavity. There's deteriorated masonry joints. There are non-conforming, non-ADA conforming handrails and entries. So you have an ADA ramp that was put in 1997, but it actually doesn't conform to today's standards. So those are the types of items that we're also finding. At the end of the day, those are existing non-conforming issues, so they're not mandatory to fix, but they are required to note them. Those railings, the blue railings that you have throughout, they're actually in the building now too, towards the new addition. Those are not conforming. You actually have to have handrail extensions for disability to come, to approach the stair. It is extensive. There's masonry deterioration around the foundation. We'll see in Mountain View too, but the foundation cracking creates a moisture issue inside of the building. So you get the water infiltration in the foundation, it goes to the crawl space, you have mold, you have other issues related to the moisture there. Some of the interior items here, and forgive me if I'm going fast, but we have a lot of hazardous materials in this building. All the brown and green tile is the 9x9 asbestos, vinyl asbestos tile. And in those same rooms, you have the 12x12 spline ceilings, which are assumed to be hazardous because of the mastic that sticks them. So any renovation that you do in those rooms, you end up needing to have an abatement contractor come in. It costs more money to remove that than typical demolition, but because of the vintage of the buildings, you do have those hazardous materials throughout this building and Mountain View. Again, back to non-conforming issues, we find this in these vintage buildings, but the hardware, because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, you do have to have specific hardware on doors. You also have to have ratings, fire ratings, along corridors in certain spaces. And if we look around this room, none of the doors have the required hardware. On these sides, you need push hardware, panic hardware to leave because this is an assembly space. But on the opposite side to pull, a lot of doors have the knob hardware that you can see in the top left photo, which you can't actually have anymore. You need a lever style so anyone can grab it or push it. And the door itself, the older wooden doors, are not fire rated. So these are a lot of items that we're going to see in both campuses too. They are in our recommendations. They are picked up so we can show them to SED. Again, I touched on the carpet flooring replacement. You may be able to see this better in your document, but in the middle photo in the top, I can use my pointer here. This is the vinyl asbestos tile, the green. This is the 12x12 spline ceiling, and in the photo itself, you can see 4 little pucks that are the mastic that holds up the ceiling tile, and that would be exposed potential hazardous material. The carpet in the top right photo, there's carpet in a lot of rooms that's starting to be slit. It's older, it's deteriorating. It's probably over more vinyl asbestos tile. We put down to replace that, and again, that number in the budget that we'll see later on is including potential replacement of hazardous material. More non-conforming, I'm going to say non-conforming a lot today on the interior side. This is all related to code. The egress doors on that first floor stair that we walk through here, they actually swing in and basically touch the landings coming down. That doesn't conform to building code, but also because it's a stairwell, you need to have what is called an area of refuge, and that's for somebody in a wheelchair, so that in the case of an emergency, they can go into a rated space and be safe until somebody can come and get them. They can't take the stairs if they're wheelchair bound. They can't take the elevator because it turns off. So in that specific case, in any non-enclosed stairwell, we don't have that at either campus. Some other items, the bottom right, that's a picture of the vinyl asbestos floor tile, but what it is a big structural crack in the concrete slab. That is an immediate structural concern, so that's something we'll see in the end in one of the immediate needs, but it runs from the the exterior wall all the way through to the corridor, and over time, it can become unsafe. So in order to mitigate that, you have to abate the tile, it all compounds on each other. Some other items here, we have, the stage is from 1951, 1957. Just some certain items that are also marked down here. The stage should be refinished. It also doesn't have any accessibility access, so you have the stairs up to the stage, but if somebody needed to access the stage that's in a wheelchair or any other handicap disability, that is not possible here. Those are items that we have to mark down in the deficiencies report. Same with the stands, the seating that you're all in there. Technically, it's not accessible. If something was going on this basketball court, there would not be room for anybody in a wheelchair to sit without being in the court itself. Next item, we'll go through some of the building systems, and I brought one of our mechanical engineers here to help me through this, but I will go through as best as I can. But a bulk of the work at both buildings, which you'll see if you flip through and as we get to it soon, are mechanical, plumbing, and electrical system improvements. A lot of the systems are beyond or at the end of their useful life. We're looking at between 25 and 40 years of a useful life for typical systems, and we're very much at that. Some of the plumbing fixtures in this building and bathroom facilities they need to be replaced. You have the full height floor urinals. In some of the gang bathrooms, there's not really any accessibility, but there's deteriorated fixtures and piping in there. Boiler replacement's a big item on here. Tim can chime in, but that's part of the reason why we have environmental issues, temperature issues in the building. Some of the unit ventilators, that we went into the art room, I think, Josh, on the second floor. That is the 1950s unit ventilator. So again, not as efficient as if we had a new system. The kitchen hood, it doesn't have fire suppression, and I believe it's undersized for what's needed. I can look back here, but again, just general overviews. Another item, the fire alarm and the CCTV. So this is both fire alarm and security. Upgrades to those. The fire alarm system doesn't meet the new state ed requirements for the mass notification and visual strobes and enunciating alarm. And then the last one on this list here is the PA clock system upgrade. So this system, while I was here the last time doing my building condition survey, all the clocks were all different, and the system is analog in the main office that I have to. It's all it's shown in this photo here, but it's all updated there. So that's all digital and can be implemented into the fire alarm and the notification system. And to have one simple solution is the most efficient. Do you want me to keep going? Do you have anything to add on to this? I know I'm just breezing through.
For this building in particular, ventilation is really what drives the number.
Yeah.
The classrooms do not breathe with those 1970s and 1950s unit ventilators. So a big bulk of the number is cutting the openings and putting in the new equipment that it requires to make a classroom and other spaces breathe to state ed and New York State mechanical code requirements.
And again, a lot of cutting that space is cutting through hazardous materials, so we have to take that into consideration when we do.
Is the plumbing counted as mechanical? Because I remember the plumbing, all the lead pipes that are run all the way throughout.
It's in the plumbing number that is up here now. But yeah, I might not have put that photo, but it is included.
No, that's a good point. Everything's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the three broad categories.
Yeah, and that is how SED.
That's how they call it, yeah.
So on this order of magnitude cost, this is construction or estimated construction cost only. And again, you're going to see some numbers, and I showed you 12 images, but we'll get to how we're going to give you all of this information shortly. Lakeview campus, the site upgrades that I mentioned, that's the paving, the fields, the drainage. What we found and estimated as deficiencies, $3,064,000. The envelope, that's the masonry, the foundations and the like, that's $831,300. All the interior spaces, that takes into consideration the flooring replacement, ceiling replacement, all the doors and hardware that are non-conforming, all the other non-conformities. 1,341,900. The bulk of the work, as Tim mentioned, are those heating, ventilation, and air conditioning services. At Lakeview, that is $5,295,500. Plumbing systems, a lot of the piping replacement. This is also fixtures, grease traps in the kitchen and the like. $762,500. And electrical systems, I didn't touch on this, but this is secure hardening of the main office to make it a secure vestibule, PFOB access, the CCTV system upgrades, the fire alarm, the PA, the electrical service, everything else that I have in this list. That's $2,049,000 for a total of construction cost of deficiencies found in the building condition survey. And again, this is not program related. This is infrastructure related. $13,344,200.
Cal, is there anything in there for abatement or no? Did you carry something?
Abatement is in all, yeah, it's,
No, you don't have to tell, just want to make,
yeah, so
just
that would be
wondering.
building materials.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we gotta carry abatement and number, you gotta carry the air monitoring, I mean, there's all the other pieces that go with
yeah,
that.
the air monitoring and all the like is an incidental cost.
Okay,
That would be
so
added
just
in at the
on the
end.
other side of the
But
ledger.
The abatement itself, same with the testing and the like, that's incidental, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But the abatement construction is in the building interior portion.
The roof's not on there because it's gonna be new.
Sorry?
The roof's not included on that because there's gonna be a new one.
Yeah, so this, since the last BVCS, the roof was in there 2020, and now that we're working on projects, it's not included anymore because it is a brand new roof. But that was leaking all over at the very end of its warranty. If not beyond.
So, question?
One more question, this is actually for you.
Sure.
None of these costs are rateable, is that correct?
No, these are eligible.
They are
They
because
are
it's renovations, yes.
Okay. But at a.
Doesn't generate the numbers that we would see,
Right,
like,
at a
different
different
conversation from us bartering for the, yeah.
Yeah,
This is very straightforward about the space, the work, and here's the aid. And the current, I don't even know if you use the up ratio on that. We'd have to find out on a renovation. I don't think you can.
You know,
With
the
that.
difference in payment, fixing up, refurbishing.
The reimbursable,
I'm sorry, what was the first
the
part?
the difference in the reimbursable rate between renovations and.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different pieces now, because earlier we were talking about new construction. And then the second part of that is why that number was lower. We were talking about renovations. We would have to look and see what that scope is and then use the district's aid ratio on those renovations. And what I was just sidebarring with Josh is, which we would have to find out. I don't know if the additional merger aid can be used for those renos. I think so, but you only get one shot at using that aid too.
The process is similar to.
That's why that earlier, that whole 26 million number was lower, because the aid on the renovations was different than the larger number on the construction.
I might chime in.
Yeah,
just
go ahead,
with-
please.
With
Yeah.
one detail, and this is fairly fresh information, and the design team, Taylor and his team just went through this building condition survey. Our team is also charged with evaluating the costs, and we haven't quite gotten to that point yet. So the process goes, the design team, the architect goes through, they do the initial evaluation, then we'll engage in this with our estimating team, and we'll evaluate the numbers. They'll probably go through a little bit of adjustments. We'll reconcile with the architect, and then these will be updated a little. This is very fresh information right now. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
absolutely fair. And what we'll get to later on is how we plan to show itemized.
And construction costs too, that which you said earlier, John, was really important. It's a straight construction cost. What it would do to go in and do that work. That's important to know too. And then candidly, which we were sidebarring about a little bit, you borrow for renovations, you have a shorter term, right? Which everybody knows, right? Your mortgage, to the 15-year mortgage versus the long one. So all the cost implications always end up different when it comes to rate and those kinds of things as well. That's for way down the road. But again, this is, you need whatever. You need new transmission, it's going to cost you $1,000.
I'll bounce over to Mountain View now, and it's in the same format. It goes site features, looking at exterior, interior, MEP, and the like. A lot of similar items. Again, Mountain View campus has 1951 to 2002 vintages. It's a lot of exterior work with site work, asphalt, sidewalks, concrete sidewalk, paving along the bus loop or on the side parking lot in front of the gym. There is fencing around the athletic fields that's starting to be worn and damaged in places, so replacing some of that. Drainage upgrades here. This is actually a photo to show a few different things, but you have an open louver, which is the hole that looks black in the center of the image, with a roof scupper that drains down right in, over top of that. So the water drips down the building side, which is the deteriorated, damaged brick because of the water. The water then seeps in to that open louver, causing, we don't know yet because we haven't opened that up, and then drips all the way down to that dark spot, and then pools right there in that space. So the water sits against the foundation, which will cause moisture issues and cracking and settling in the lake. So that drainage would be to pull that somewhere else. Bottom left, playground resurfacing. Playgrounds, the actual fibers in the playground are nearing the end of its life, and then the play surface around is cracking all over, so replacing that. Resurfacing the athletic fields, and again, the bottom right photo is some cracks in front of the gym for the asphalt that would need to be milled and repaved. Continuing on with the exterior foundation repair, so along the main office, if you walk into the Mountain View campus, you can look under where the main office is, and there's a long foundation crack. There's also cracking along the larger classroom wing. That's where the majority of the water infiltration is in the crawl space. And that big right-hand picture, that's an open crack, and it's significantly longer than that, but that's the magnitude of these cracks. There's some window replacement. This is the band room in the middle music room, and there's insulated panels that are just filled with wood from previous penetrations. Exterior doors are starting to really show their life. The hardware is non-conforming. I talked about enough non-conforming hardware in the last building, but those the knob hardware on the green doors, and they're deteriorating. You can see daylight from the inside, so that's a efficiency issue. And again, more masonry restoration. Those are water overflow leaks from the roof, draining down the wall, staining it, creating mold, deteriorating brick joints, and the like. Same items on the inside. Not as much abatement work, but there are a lot of non-compliant doors and hardware, not rated doors to all the classroom spaces. I would say 60 to 70% of the doors are not rated. Carpet, flooring in the bottom left, deterioration there, but assumed over the vinyl asbestos tile. It's starting to peel up here in the middle of that classroom. The auditorium in the front, the gym's floor looks great, but the auditorium doesn't have ADA accessibility, and the stage doesn't. It needs to be refinished. And again, the pull-out bleachers in that space don't have ADA seating as well. The front secure vestibule, there is a push-button call to let somebody in, but the interior vestibule doors are wood. They're not hardened, so worst case, it's not safe for active shooter or anybody trying to force their way in. And that is an item that we do need to mark in BCS. Ceiling deterioration. So you look up in the ceilings and you see stained tiles. What should happen is that you should open those tiles and see if there's pipe replacement or piping that needs replacement up above, or roof leaks, or unit, if there's ceiling units, there's leaking there. Another item that is required is daylight in certain spaces. The cafeteria and many other program spaces in the basement at Mountain View do not have the required or adequate daylight. The bottom right photo is taken in the afternoon with full sun, and with the lights off, you can see that the daylight comes in right in that well, and that's the big glass well right at the outside of the auditorium. And it does shine on the few tables right underneath the well, but as you can see, it does not get into the space. And it's a dark cafeteria. Cafeteria flooring needs to be replaced along with the kitchen flooring. That's in our long list, but I'm going to continue moving on. MPE as a group, again, a lot of the spaces, I'll talk program for a minute, but a lot of the spaces are actually used for classrooms or functions that the space wasn't originally set up for. So you have a lot of 6th grade classrooms or district offices or other classrooms that have elementary, which is pre-K through 3 casework in them, so the height is significantly shorter. And they have these, this is the top left photo, they have these combination sink and bubblers. Those aren't ADA accessible. In most cases, the piping is lead and they're not potable water. There's a sign on that photo that says don't drink the water. Technically by code, these two, the sink and the bubbler, which is the drinking fountain, need to be in 2 separate sink holes. So again, it's like three or four in one for non-conforming. Add piping replacement to that, fixture replacement. That's a pretty significant number in the building condition survey. Boiler replacement at Mountain View as well, along with the unit ventilators, the packaged thermal air conditioners that are along the perimeter of rooms, adding relief air. That's a big item. You're going to see that in total. In the kitchen, there is a grease trap. You need to add a grease trap. There's a kitchen hood that needs to be replaced and added an Ansel fire alarm system, fire suppression system. A couple more here. I'm almost done. The PA system upgrades along with the clock, the fire alarm, the mass notification. So again, similar things. And then this photo here, gang bathroom upgrades. So a lot of the gang bathrooms aren't ADA accessible. They do need to be. And then this photo here is urinals that need to be replaced, but also just an opening in the wall where a fixture was taken off and never replaced. So again, the same slide we saw, order of magnitude cost. Site features are roughly the same in this one, $2,067,700. Building envelope, so a big portion of those masonry repairs and exterior doors. And some windows, $1,281,000. Interiors, doors, floors, ceilings, non-conforming walls, non-rated walls, and the like. $2,499,750. Again, these are construction costs only. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, $4,876,500. Plumbing, these are fixtures, $534,500. And electrical systems, $3,381,900. For a total construction cost, BCS items, $14,641,350. The bus garage is very quick. The roof is deteriorating on one end. The whole metal roof needs to be replaced. There's some interior renovation, masonry work that needs to be done. That's the center photo. There's cracking under the windows and some structural concerns. And then the code issue here, no hot water to the eye wash station, no floor drains, and the fixtures are outdated. And I'm not sure when the last time was there tested, but that it might not work. Smaller cost, but it is a cost. Building envelope, that's the roof, $625,000, along with some exterior masonry repairs. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning upgrades at the bus garage, $925,000. Plumbing systems, $203,000. Electrical systems, $93,500, or a total of $1,846,500. Now, those are all construction costs, but you do have to add in the fact that we're not doing the work today. So we have to add in escalation. We have to add in other administrative costs, which are incidental costs. So testing, hazardous materials, design fees, construction managers, any administration costs, and the like. So this slide, district-wide order of magnitude, which is on your form, lists the total construction costs of each campus. And if we look at strictly construction costs for BCS-related items, for all 3 buildings, it's $29,832,500. Add in 22% for incidentals, which is typically the going rate for projects. Of that construction cost, this all compounds onto the construction cost. $6,712,000. Add in a 15% contingency for things that are unknown, $4,474,000. Inflation, I did 12% because this is assuming that 3 years we would hit the middle point of construction costs if we did it today. That's 4% a year, $3,579,000 for a total cost of BCS items, non-program spaces, $44,598,916. So I just went through a bunch of information, but how do I get that to you? And here's what our next steps are. When we do our BCS, we go through, we have floor plans, we sort of show on the plans where these items are. We put them into report software where we can then export all the data to you. We also put it in a nice legible form on drawings similar to the ones you have in front of you. So our next steps are to create these overall plans. They look like this. This is the first floor of the Mountain View campus. There's a key legend up in the top right with some photos. Each color means something different. And as you get that, you'll be able to find, well, here's where all the doors are that are not conforming. Here's where all the plumbing issues are. Here's where all the exterior work is. I go back one. I go back here. And then we also have this report, and we can export that a few different ways. It can be done by room. It can be done by section, just like I showed, building exterior, interior, and the like. But that has a snip of the plan. It has the recommendation. It has a cost. It has the remaining useful life, or if it's beyond. It has what we consider condition, whether it's satisfactory, unsatisfactory, critical, like any relevant photos. So this document will be pretty big. It'll be a PDF likely, but we can share any version that you need. But that will be all of the information and all of the costs that you have for all the deficiencies in both of these buildings and the bus project. And that's what's coming from BCA.
Nothing in there with athletic fields or other.
No. Well, any site deficiencies that we talked about will be in there. It won't be anything to do with anything new. It will be the resurfacing of the two fields that you have now, like the fence here for the softball field. It'll be anything deficiency at the campus as it stands now.
Some of those pictures, and some of those pictures, you're showing kind of like what it looks like from the outside. And is that 22% for the incidentals? Does that include if you take one wall or one piece of foundation, and then you find out there's a lot more damage than you anticipated? Yep. Is that a set amount for the incidentals, or can that number go up?
So that is the contingency. So on that form, the incidentals was 22%. Those are sort of more soft costs for the design and the construction period. The contingency is the amount for unknowns, which is when we uncover, when we take away that brick to replace it, or we point it and we find mold, or we find issues that are structural within the cavity wall, or whatever we do. Same with removing carpet and finding vinyl asbestos tile, or removing a wall to add in a mechanical system and there's something in the wall that we need to do. That's what the contingency is for. And as we work towards a project, we have a construction contingency and we have a design contingency. So as we design, the design contingency goes lower as we get further and further into the design, and then we start to sort of estimate what we should have as our construction contingency as we move forward. So we'll do some deconstructive testing and hazardous material testing during design, which will give us a lot of the answers as much as possible. That might allow us to take some contingency down, but we do have that as a cushion throughout the project. Joe, I can keep going because I have the.
Yeah, just run through the list of the priority stuff. We'll set the stage. Remember, this was all other things being equal. We want to shore the buildings up, do what's necessary to keep both campuses open. And if candidly you decide to do nothing at all, you're going to have to minimally do this to keep your schools open. So go ahead.
Yeah. So go ahead.
When would you expect that report to be done?
I'd like to have two for the December meeting. Again, we have the information, we have to compile it and put it all together here. Same with the floor plan. So that should all be a package that's handed at the December meeting. Yeah, so immediate needs. I said $40+ million for the BCS work. Again, there are certain items that are not as much of a necessity as others. There are some that are existing non-conforming. There are things that don't really need to be done. They're not a risk for safety, security, and the like. So this slide might not be in your packet, but it's an immediate needs. And how we go through this is this is something that takes care of leaks in the envelope. This is any immediate structural concerns throughout the building. This is replacing systems that are at or beyond their useful life. This is increasing safety and security. So the numbers, I separated the scope items, Lakeview campus and Mountain View campus. it's some of the drainage improvements at Lakeview, it's some of the structural cracking, it's a lot of the flooring that is sort of in immediate need of replacement. It's mechanical system replacement, that's going to stay almost the same, because that's the end of life is the most important in this instance. The deteriorated piping, some of the state mandated fire alarm systems, and then some security and access improvements. And it's very similar to Mountain View, except for a few site changes. But at Lakeview, this you do have, if we look at everything total,
That's correct.
yeah, I just have Lakeview at the top and Mountain View at the bottom. Lakeview, 7,562,200. So it's about half, a little less than half of the overall BCS items. Same thing at Mountain View. Sorry, one more item here. That's actually not counting the $1.2 million roof project that's happening here. It's a little higher than that, but because we're doing that, that's already taken off. At Mountain View, it's around the same, 7,620,500. And again, if you look at those breakouts, the majority of that work is the mechanical systems because those are the biggest involved. And it's just 4.5 million or 5.5 million for each building. So we do the same compilation here. Lakeview campus, 7,562,200. Mountain View campus, 7,620,500. Total construction cost for immediate needs, 15,182,700. Add in the same factors, the 22% for incidentals, the 15% for contingency, and then the 12% for inflation, because again, we assume that this would happen and you'd be in the midpoint of construction in 3 years, so it's 4% a year. Just immediate needs to keep both campuses moving forward as they are now, but in a little bit more efficient manner. $20,572,223. So it's about half.
So just to be clear, this is like bottom of the barrel, just keep the doors open.
Yeah.
This is where we're at.
This is no program enhancements. This is
No health and safety. It's just literally keep the doors open, keep it legal to keep.
yeah, there are some safety improvements in there, but again, it's not abating every space. It's the minimum that you should do to keep everything.
Wait, on this again, this how much?
It would be, we do the same sort of calculation. You end up going through your building aid units, you find your maximum cost allowance, and your aid ratio would be aided up to the cost allowance. We didn't do the calculation on that for this yet, but it would be whatever your aid rate is times or of the 20 million.
Can you go back?
We don't know what that is.
No,
Not yet, sir.
And have we looked into what happened?
So we've looked into the septic issue being if we add on to that building. It is part of the overall.
But not remedying the problem.
Well, that would be included in the overall list. I don't have the number in front of me, but that would be part of that. However, if we do move forward with an option of an addition on that, which is, as mentioned earlier on, we'd have to do work on the septic system to increase the size to match the capacity that it's now at that.
You said it wouldn't, like, one question about that, it wouldn't be all the abatement? Like what I thought I heard you say is that, doing these two, keeping both schools at the bare necessities wouldn't include abatement in the whole school. So are you talking about like the lead abatement, asbestos abatement, or?
So the way I have it broken out here is areas that are the floor tiles still in okay shape, ceiling tiles not touched. You're not touching that, so it's technically okay. Any area that's affected by mechanical work or replacing flooring, we know it's needed, or ceilings and the like, that would be included.
Would it include removing all lead from all the pipes?
The piping, yes. If we were doing the piping replacement, all of the pipes would be abated.
What's your estimate on, so this is a minimum to keep the doors open? For how long?
But you essentially get the mechanical system life. So you get the life on the new systems, and then in another probably less than 10 years, you'll go through another building condition survey in 5 more years. You'll get
And there
more
will be other
recommendations.
things that will be immediate
Exactly.
needs.
Yep. So you'll take care of the big chunks. You probably won't see another $5.5 million mechanical upgrade in the next building condition survey or next project if you keep going. However, you will have others. And by then, you never know what the ceilings are, the flooring condition is. I know that the flooring in this cafeteria and a lot of just the vinyl tile, the VCT throughout the building is starting to crack at every joint. So that will probably be peeling. You'll need to do something like that. That is aesthetic, but it also is safety.
So you do bare bones at 20, maybe a little bit more, but you're remedying some issues at 44, and we really still don't know if it's going to get us 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. It's going to be rehashed every 5 years, and you just kick the can to the next.
Exactly. Yeah, and you don't solve the bus garage issue. You don't have the athletic fields, and to be frank, you really don't notice a difference when you come in after the project, except for maybe the quality of life inside because of the mechanical systems, but you wouldn't come in and think that you got new classrooms or new labs or a cafeteria or the like.
One question on my end, Taylor. So initially, the district is receiving aid based on their merger status. Moving forward, that then drops down to, maybe Josh, you know best, what aid ratio?
Where we drop to?
Yeah. So initially, we're up around like 95% aid, is it?
90.7.
90.7, is it? And then beyond that, it goes back down to the district's regular aid percentage, which.
Yeah, I don't have that.
And that's after 6 more years, I believe.
We're in year 6 right now.
You're in year 6 right
So
now.
we got 4 years to work with, and but maybe that's something we should look into too. So this is where.
And I just want to comment on that only because this is where so much of the confusion came in last time. It's not 91 or 90.7% on the entire cost.
That's true, ma'am. Yep, that is very.
And that-
true.
that is- that is-
Hammered that point home.
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, but you just said that, I want to
91%
clarify
of
it
what's
because I
aidable,
don't want
yes.
that.
On that maximum amount is what it pertains. Yep.
Josh, you were going to say something.
Well, I'm debating whether or not to bring this up because I really don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But when we talk about the bus garage, as things stand right, if nothing changes right now, starting in 2027, we cannot purchase a vehicle that is not an electric vehicle, that's any vehicle or a bus. And in 2035,
Josh, you're gonna have to speak louder, they can't hear you.
sorry. So if nothing changes right now, starting in 2027, any vehicle, van, Traverse or bus, any size, needs to be an electric bus. And then by 2035, the entire fleet needs to be moved over to an entire electric fleet. So based on that, do you have concerns about our current bus garage?
The bus garage across the street from Mount View,
Listen,
You didn't even talk about this one because I don't think it's usable.
No, we don't do a BCS. It's
And let me just to clarify Tom's question, the former bus garage here was totally taken offline as a bus garage. It is just a storage facility right now.
Great, thanks, Tom. Fabulous, thank you.
great, thank you.
Thanks, Dal, and thanks to BCA. As a reminder, we moved all this up so we can have the facts and talk about the conversation. Just a couple of things. It was raised, anything that gets disturbed gets abated. That's the rule of thumb. So as soon as you're going in, I just did rental space. Every time you go into any of these spaces, it's a surprise. Surprise, right? Take something else out, surprise. And you have to deal with something else. So 9 times out of 10, there's a lot more.
When they're testing, do they, they look at the carpets and they say, oh, they're ripped, do they test them for mold or anything like
Yeah,
that?
they test for everything. Yeah. Usually that's usually the procedure generally is if something's suspicious, right? I mean, we all know the vintage building we're in, right? You just said there's VAT everywhere. It's in the mastic. It's gonna be the installation on the pipes. I mean, it goes without saying. But if something was, I just did one. There was black material on ceiling tiles. There were the contractor, the fiber contractor was running fiber above the ceiling tiles. Did a roof replacement 6 years ago, and they abated up there. But when they attached the roof, it was flat roof. When they attached the roof, material fell on top of the ceiling tiles, and you didn't know. It's a drop ceiling, so it's been up there for 6 years. The fiber contractor went up there to go do work, move piles, there's material everywhere, right? So we called our Atlantic testing consultant, tested it, found out it was hot, shut it, unfortunately it was the summer, so we didn't have to deal with kids. Set up the tents, did all the work, and that was just to clear all that out. We couldn't, the stuff that goes along with that is incredible, right? We couldn't sell some tiles, had to get rid of, what was cleanable, where did it fall, was it in whatever. Some of it was high bay areas where there was no drop ceiling, so there would be a ledge up there underneath where it might have dropped. So you never, once you open it up, you never know. But that's usually the process. If something is suspicious, send it out and get it tested, and then you take next steps from there and start the abatement. Yeah, sure. And just two other things real quick. I think, how much longer, I think was a really good point. Like you just did a roof, right? 20 years. You're going to fix you're going to do the mechanicals, and those are long overdue, right? You're going to get system life out of that, and you're going to get system life out of that. But the real question is, you do all that, as we know right now, you still have another 20 million behind it in a minimum. So at a minimum, you're going to fix the systems, but not touch any of the other spaces. You're going to fix the structural, as Taylor said, issues and those kinds of things, for that, and not get to any of the other spaces, knowing already now with this BCS, there's 20 million behind it. And two, just so everybody knows, like every school district in the state is required to do a BCS every 5 years. That's how facilities planning. You showed up there tomorrow and said, "Oh, we're going to renovate over here," and they say, "Okay, let me look at your BCS." So that's why these documents are really important for future planning, because when you indicate it's a problem, then you go to them to solve the problem, they're much more amenable to it and saying, "Well, it wasn't in your BCS. Well, that wasn't, you didn't have the gym floor wasn't deteriorating." You see it a lot of times in renovation project, you're doing whatever, and we're going to do the gym floor too. Well, it was never noted the gym floor was a problem, right? So it's important that this paper, all this stuff walks lockstep, which they did a fabulous job doing. Yeah, go ahead.
It should be important to note too, that when that building condition survey notes that your boiler is at the end of life, if you don't replace it, and then 2 years from now your boiler quits and you go to state ed and want some money, they're gonna say, "You knew 2 years ago your boiler needed replacing, you didn't do it." There's a whole different aid ratio for that, because they don't consider it an emergency anymore because you knew about it 2 years ago.
Correct, absolutely. You see it more so with roofs. You got a leak in the roof, right? You buy a little time, do a little work, but buy a little time. Next thing you know, right, you're doing the whole entire roof. And they say, "Well, you didn't say you needed all roof replacement before." Like, well, we were making it through with patching and a little this and a little of that, and then all of a sudden it becomes a significant problem. So like all of this stuff really needs to align, and that's why the document's so thorough. So you're going to get the report, but it's gonna. Will be nice part of that you can see in the building how things are. But when you talk about masonry, we're talking about foundations, we're talking about structural issues, we're talking about mechanical issues. Like the plumbing was great. We're talking about traps, we're talking about things in the kitchen, right? You all know the vintage of the buildings. This isn't, anything a shock by any stretch of the imagination, I'm sure. So. Okay.
George,
So,
I just
go
want to
ahead,
point
Josh,
out,
please. No, absolutely.
It's 7:35, and I just want to make sure we're out of here by 8 or in that neighborhood.
Got it. We're going to wrap things up and talk about next steps. So just, it's a summary, and I know we've talked about all these pieces. And again, this is summarizing the options. It's the committee will tell us what we need to do for next steps. Our job is to get you as much information as possible so you can make informed decisions and have what you feel you need to be able to work through what next steps might be. A new facility on a new site solves all the problems holistically. We all know that, all right? Renovations, again, assumes no changes to the educational program, right? So there isn't anything we're adding or doing any of the other things. The only thing we're adding are those elementary classrooms, right? So we're renovating things and getting everything up to speed, but we're not adding additional spaces that might be used for anything that's programmatic, right? So the only renovations are getting the existing classrooms as they're used up to 2024 standards, and the addition that we talked about for the additional students. You know, you're still gonna have in the spaces we have, and we'll renovate them as best as we can. Again, the addition, which we talked about, and we talked about the logistics of dealing with renovations in occupied space. And again, if the fields go off-site, there's no aid with that. Carol already raised this, I put it on here anyway, but you're already you're 1.1 and change million into this roof anyway, which was absolutely necessary. And again, anything in the immediate needs category, it's an infrastructure project. You know, 2014, we did it at the middle, did 10 million renovations at the middle school. And everybody's like, what'd you do? Right, I mean, there's nothing sexy about doing soffits and windows and boilers and, right, that's all there is to it. You know, we had to do a ton of abatement, it was a 1951 building. It is what it is, but it took $10 million on that BCF, that's the investment. The building was in great shape otherwise, but systems came up. They last did mechanical infrastructure in the early 90s, it came back up again. Attached to the high school, which is brand new in 98. Right, it was a good investment. People are like, oh, okay, now what? They don't look around and say, all the sockets around, everything's new work, you know, and all the HVAC is replaced. That's used, replaced for there, used ER, used unused. Everything's replaced to get the building more efficient and in a better space. But nobody was bragging about those things. You're not walking into the fancy tech room with any of that. It's none of that business. It's meat and potatoes. And part of that conversation again is it all needs to be done with the lens of the bigger picture. You know, so to Josh's point on time, and I appreciate your patience going through everything. I told you in the email I had a lot to cover, and I think we could cover a lot. We need to talk about what we were talking about earlier. This next steps for us. Think about taking options off the table if folks are having that conversation, or what direction you want us to continue pursuing, directions, I should say. So we're using our time to be the most efficient, continuing to flesh out what direction you might want to go with options. And it goes to really everything that we spoke to earlier for the 20 minutes, half hour we had that conversation about what's next. And again, it's next steps. And our job is to serve the will of the committee. And I think that up to this point, we've been making sure you have all the information you need to think about what those next steps might be. Again, I hope you feel we provided as much as we can. But where do you want to go from here to continue to narrow down the options? Zach, make sure my good friend Zach here, taking our notes. He did our minutes for us before. We like, he's got them all tonight. We'll make sure we get these verbatim. And I leave it to, yes.
From what I've heard everybody here saying, and from what I've heard the audience saying, I think that it's going to be really important for us to really make sure that we have the community's opinion and voice drive our decisions. But I also think that it's a really good point that it's hard to go to the community right now without knowing. So I think it's really our job to find out what is the bottom line for these three options. Is there a new site? Because I heard a lot of people saying that they don't have anything wrong with new construction, but boy, that they're all damn. So like, is there a second site that we can find? I don't know. It's been many years. What does it like? And not only like, is this a good site, but get our options and break it down into a manner that people can understand. Like, what is the tax impact per $100,000 of assessment? What's it actually going to look like to hit their pocketbook? Because I can't say how many people I heard say, new construction, we can't afford that. That's crazy. We should do this. And that was more expensive. And that fell on just, I think a lot of it was lack of communication, but to really make sure that we have very clear, these are the impacts of, and this is the financial impact for these three choices, and then let the community decide, you know? So I think we need to like, not cut out any option yet, but like find out what each option looks like, and you know, bottom dollar breakdown.
Yeah, there's options in that option though. Like this is the part where I want to try to get as granular as we can. Is it saying buildings, you know, this goes back to the site was bad, the building's bad, the project was wrong, then, right? Is it same scale, different site? So the site we want to resolve, different scale, different site, different something, different renos and, right? So I want to keep fleshing this out a little bit with everyone about, again, it's back to what was the problem? Is it the project? Is it the scale? Is it the site? Is it, and we're happy to go into all of those. But if there was this consensus of this project was fabulous, it was just in the wrong spot, right? That puts us in one direction, or you know what, this really wasn't the right project and it really wasn't in the right place, then that's a different solution set. Or is it, should we be looking more at the renovations? Is it not, I think somebody raised earlier, it's not new construction, it's not really new site. What is it about renovations in addition? So I encourage you to have this conversation among yourselves as we think about direction, as we look to December. Yes, ma'am.
As we're talking about that, tonight, to your point, that a lot of people did say they wanted to keep it at maximum, but what we have not included anywhere is what are the options for a place to put a bus garage? And in the current configuration of the district, is the bus garage that served Elizabethtown, is that space with these repairs enough to serve Boquet Valley? I don't know the answer to that. Do we need another location? What is available? What is the cost of spaces that would be available to put athletic fields? Because as we're making that decision, or as we're asking the community to chime in on that we need that information. We need that full cost, not just the cost of the renovation and addition, but the cost of the renovation and addition, plus perhaps a new location and a new construction for a bus garage, plus the cost of new athletic fields in another location.
Yeah, in the current reno number, we're carrying 5 million for the bus garage.
Right.
But we can, I don't know how
But is
much.
that bus garage sufficient? That's, I don't know
The
the
current,
answer.
I mean, bus garage right now is just, it's really in rough shape.
But with the renovation, is it sufficient for the
Okay,
size?
I mean, there's enough, I mean, system-wise it'll be.
Yeah,
I mean,
don't
there's
know
no
if the site
lifts, I mean, it goes
footprint
back to
is
the infrastructure stuff. The lifts we talked about, I mean, it's, and you will, if all this stuff, then it's only a matter of time, in my opinion. This is gonna get dragged out for I don't know how long, but no one's gonna say you're all gonna need electric buses. I'll be shocked. I don't see it going that way, but I see it happening at some point. You could never do it where you are right now. You know, so based on just the evolution of things and the current state of that, even with lifts and other stuff, I would say getting out of it would make the most sense regardless. Did we do additional site evaluation on the other parcels if it was just a garage?
I don't believe so. I think so.
Zach,
I
you
know.
capture that? I think it's, all right, if we do the renovations, which we're carrying the number for the garage, where's the garage gonna go? Is really the question.
Right. And what's the cost of that?
Right, like I
And
said,
what's the
we've
cost of-
been ballparking that 5 million, which we think is safe. Depending on the site, we may be able to get a little more granular. I don't know if we can do that in the next, we're short too, or next meetings. Because of the holidays, comes up pretty quick. But let's capture that, Zach. So all other things being equal, if we do renovations, we haven't solved the other problem. So what does the site evaluation look like if we put a bus garage somewhere or if we put field somewhere?
Right, but that influences the total cost.
Not only did we come up somewhat short on articulating the facts surrounding the actual tax impact to the last project that didn't pass, but we did not do any advertising, marketing, and developing of what it would have cost us to do the renovation with the shorter term and the lower amount of reimbursement. Because that is another part of this. I know it may have been on a sheet here or a sheet there that someone didn't hear or someone didn't see, but the fact of the matter is that we need to have that in stone, concrete, scaled down this,
Right, I
scaled
think
down that.
once you get to the options, they'll come out. There's no question about that because we got to amortize it different as well, right? So if it came down to finally you get to it's A, B, and C, and part of it's a renovation and everything else, we got to amortize that borrowing against what the cost is and what's going to be debatable, the delta on that, and have what that is for each option, period. We have to do that, no matter what it is.
And I'm not saying we didn't try, I'm not saying
Right,
there weren't
right, right.
attempts, and I'm not sure, saying it was, it just wasn't, it didn't get the front page news, it wasn't what stuck.
Right, right.
The other stuff stuck. It
Well, I
wasn't-
think the decision was made, I wasn't here, but it felt like going through everything, the decision was made on the other pieces and the full extrapolation of the other parts might not have got as much attention, even though we had it. So to your point, I think it's gotta be, if we do this one, this is it. If this is it, this is it for each option and what that might be. Because you're gonna have to your point, you're gonna have to deal with the garage. And if you're doing fields, if you're gonna do rentals there and fields somewhere else, it's all out of pocket. It's all out of pocket. You can find a gorgeous 80-acre, 10-acre parcel somebody's gonna give us.
So that should
Right.
really be added on to the 44.
Right, right.
Right.
It should really cost you between the low end, 3 and 5 million, do some, all right, I don't know what the extent of your fields wanna be. Low end, 3, if the infrastructure's there. You know, somebody can turn around and say, there's this gorgeous thing over here, we wanna have beautiful ball fields and soccer, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's great. You're still gonna have to pay 3 to 5 million, depending on, again, 3 to 5 million out of pocket.
So if your school is on one side of the road and you've got this nice field on the other side of the road. But it's not
They
connected.
used to, we got away with that in Voorheesville, and it was 1999.
So if we put a walkway connected to here, up, over, and back down, they're connected.
Like I said, we got away with it in Voorheesville in 1999 or 2000. I left there in 01. We were just, the project just went through. I'm older than I look.
I don't touch that one.
And you had across 85A, a farmer sold a bunch of land. It was the other, school was on one side, 85A was there, the fields were on the other side. And they called it adjacent, but that was a long time ago. A lot of people are gone now. But I'm not gonna take it off the table. We gotta have the conversation, stay at it.
So it's joined together by a walkway that goes up and over the hill.
No, there was crosswalk with the whole thing. You know, because again, it was 25 years ago. But they did the crosswalk, they did everything. You walked out of school, you walked down the sidewalk, walked the sidewalk, crossed over. So I'm not gonna dismiss it. I think we gotta look at it. You know, at some point they're gonna say, will you stop coming to us with, you know, remember their position is we gave you everything we could. But that might qualify. We'll ask the question. If that opportunity comes up, we'll ask the question. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to state that I do know some factual information that the supervisor of Elizabethtown has told me that the town fields in Elizabethtown would be available for the school to use if we needed to use them. They're up on Noble Terrace. There is a one-way road, but she checked into the information with the state and with the highway departments, and they said it was legal for school buses to travel on that road. So that would be helpful for a athletic field solution.
And it's the scope of your fields too. I don't know. All I know what was on the drawing that you all have about what you wanted in terms of fields too, and that will drive costs. But I think, you gotta look at everything on the table, especially if there's gonna be construction and other stuff going on. You know, if you're gonna tear everything up and do leach beds, move the leach beds behind Mountain View, you're taking the entire backyard. So if that might have to be part of the solution if that's the case. No question.
There are fields.
Yeah.
More than one.
Joe, one thing I've noticed on this, going back even further, when we first started, you talk about Mountain View and you've got 1951 construction and then 2002 project. There was a substantial project conducted in 1992, which point they undermined 3/4 of the school, created the basement area. They put the new office addition, it was technically classroom, but it's an office addition on the south side of the building. Added the elevator, and I'm looking through some of the items here, scupper damage, things along those lines. That's a 30-year-old issue. A lot of that's maintenance above and beyond that. I mean, yeah, some of it has reached its lifespan for sure, the insulated panels over the windows, but maintenance is going to do a lot of this as we go forward.
That's an understatement. That's an understatement. It always, every time we get into these, it becomes, okay, so what have you done to, right? And we just had a very similar conversation. You're going to put brand new RTUs and a year go by and you're not replacing the filters. You're not lubricating, you're not replacing the filters. That's going to be on a quarterly schedule. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on all those counts. You know,
How
doesn't
much
matter
for
what you,
the,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
how much of the board, Board of Education's hands tied with the only a small amount of increase that they're in budget. It becomes a better scenario if you let it go rotten and then have to fix it and they get the state aid.
It's true. In the long, you know, if you wanna, you know, depends how long you're suffering it under, but unfortunately. Yes,
I'd like to request that you guys provide us with, so the immediate needs that we have, how much aid do we get for those immediate needs?
for the immediate need list, okay, so we wanna make a decision that an
And
option
then
will
the
be
immediate
only.
needs on the order of magnitude, the district-wide cost, like the 44 million, what's the aidable? That one you kind of already had, right? Isn't that the one you've already?
Yeah, that would, yeah, it's, yes, because
Very
that's a
general
full, if
estimate.
you look at that number, it's kind of so, that's a full renovation.
Yeah.
Almost to a large.
There is
I mean, we could,
an item in one of the, it might be in one of your past slides that talks about the maximum cost allowance for each building.
Yeah.
yeah, it's 26 million.
Yeah,
plus.
so that would be what you're aid eligible up to. So if you're 20 million, or if you're $7 million, that.
In the new project, how much were the taxpayers out that had to
I
cover?
didn't even bring any of the local share
The
stuff.
local share of the, for all dam was 26 million. The
Well,
local
he's
share
talking about
of,
tax value. I didn't bring the
So it's
impact
26
stuff.
million local share had to come up with
for the
the new
whole
project.
building, the complete renovation estimate for adding on the 30,000 square foot. and,
31 million was out of pocket for Mountain View.
It's 22.
For the renovating of Mountain View?
31,
And
I'm sorry, local 22 local
22.
share.
So
I'm
there's
sorry,
like a $3
backwards,
million
yeah.
difference between building the brand new site.
Yeah.
And then doing all the renovations only at Mountain View.
you got more bang for your buck than new school.
Yeah.
And no bus routes, no site.
No athletics fields. Simplest comparison, maybe, which I think it might be getting at, out of pocket.
Yeah.
25 million on the project that was rejected, 22 million to do Mountain View with the addition. Doesn't solve the field problem.
And then
Like I say, you take that 22 million, put another 3-4 million in for fields, you're out of pocket, it's the same.
But in that line, I think in the same slide, it does show what the MCA is for each building, just
Yes.
renovation wise.
Yes.
And that's what
Yes.
would answer your question. So
The MCA on the Mountain View campus, renos and addition, 31. MCA on the new project with 38, MCA on this building, 31. So it's the same MCA for both buildings, it's the same.
So
count.
what it comes down to, the needed needs to be fully covered off of the,
Correct.
they'd be covered 90.X%.
Yeah, so of the
So
30.
obviously that could pass the taxpayer, taxpayers are gonna have to pass something down the road, right?
Yes, yes.
This is basically the last option that we would have, you know, if we put something else forward to them and they decide not to do that, this has to happen no matter what. But then, you know, by that time it happens, that aid unit, percentage may go down.
Right. It's almost, you know, something has to happen. It's the last ditch stuff on these last slides.
Yeah.
You know, we get, you know, time goes by and everything else. Foundation issues, right? You got structural stuff.
No matter what, that's gotta get spent.
Yeah, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Like you would say, you know what, just fix what we have, fine. You know, you're 20 million, you're underneath for the sake of argument. If they're
But
20
taxpayers are out basically nothing on that, they'd be fully covered for that. Not 10%, yeah, okay, 10%.
I don't want to get in trouble about what's fully covered. It's not fully covered. It's 90%. Yeah, 90% of it. It's not
And then if we get,
Not 100%.
No, it's 90% of 100% in that scenario.
and if we did all the recommended upgrades, that's a 44 million cost, we're still only getting 26 million of it.
You're getting 90% of 26 million.
Yeah.
91.
On top of that, Joe, could you say the renovations can only be financed over a 15-year?
Yeah,
So
then
that
we'd have to
cost-
figure out impact there. Yeah, that's 100%.
Technically, the cost of the taxpayers is probably gonna be just as much on something like that. This is-
Yeah, and then you still got to do the fields. Like I said, if you just did a straight dollar to dollar analysis, right? You were 25 out of, again, this is last project, you're 25 out of pocket for sake of argument. on that project versus 22 out of pocket at Mountain View without without the rest of the cost. So by the time you spend the rest of the out of pocket on the fields and everything, the out of pocket ends up being the same.
Do we think taxpayers are basically like, I mean, we don't want to get rid of either one of these schools?
That's
We
a
wanna-
conversation for the committee. Like I said, I
mean,
just, these are just
We
part,
don't
all
care
of
if
this
we
is
pay
part
more
of the
money, but
solution
we
set.
want, you know,
the
I almost think we're gonna need a dry erase board, and we're gonna need a little better sort of technique to build consensus, because we have a lot of different ideas from a lot of different people, and I feel like the idea of building a consensus one way or another, it may take something that we can all see, I don't know, because there's a lot
Yeah, I
of good
think,
ideas.
right. I think you have to keep fleshing the ideas out before we start the second part of that process. So I'd like to hear more. We haven't heard from everybody either, right? I think it's nice to hear from everybody on the committee as well. We have this great conversation going around really what the cost is. I think it's important that we look at, if you're gonna do Mountain View, fine, we gotta find a place for fields, right? So I think, like Sam raised earlier, let's get this concurrent part going to find out where, you gotta put the garage somewhere, Jim. I'm sorry, put the garage somewhere, and you have to put the fields somewhere as well.
Is there space behind this building for fields or not? Like,
There's
it's
one,
all
there's
forest.
one field. I don't know what the property is behind, but there's one soccer
It's a
field.
wetland. It's a wetland. It's
Yeah.
drainage.
I didn't know.
It's all county property. So it's, I mean, like, you could certainly
That'd
negotiate
be
that.
able, because it's connected. Is it fair?
It does flatten out, and then it comes out of the.
Go ahead. Do you have something else you want to raise, Ron?
Is it fair to say that this next 3 years is sort of, if we were going to do a new standalone project, it's a little bit of a now or never kind of thing, in the sense that if we end up it's dropping into the pocket and kind of doing the bare minimum to get by, get our 20 years, then we got to do that same kind of thing over again a few times to get to our 90 years.
Yeah, and it's almost part of the thinking is always, it's almost like you got a coupon, right? This would be already my wife, right? I got a coupon, right? Do you want to maximize the value of that, right? So you could go in and maximize, to the point that was raised earlier, ton 8 on this, right? It's just a $20 million project. Even if you did all 40, you're still getting 8 on 20, 90% getting 26 million of it, right? To do that, but you've used your coupon on not maximizing the value of it. Does that make sense? Like you have an opportunity to get more value based on your merger aid. Here's, we have, I don't know if there's speedways. I'm a member of Speedway, love Speedway. I get 3 points off gas every time I buy coffee, right? But I use the cheap gas and my wife uses the expensive gas. I don't use the coupon on the cheap gas. She uses the coupon on the expensive gas, right? So instead of $3.75, it ends up going down to 3 1/4. I'm paying 3 1/4 anyway, right? She has a bigger tank. It's not worth me coming down. So it's like the value of that is more. And again, this is a generational piece. I gotta ask you, do you want to hear from? Go ahead.
I'll be quick. The numbers that you were just talking about, the 20, whatever, the amount we would get, say, or any of that discussion, does that include, like, I believe we saved like 5 million right now from the incentive operating aid, and we will continue to receive that for the next 9 years. So does that, those figures take into account that, but we still have that.
Yeah, operating aid is over here and then facilities aid is over here. No ever do those 2 lines
So is
cross.
that just for operating aid, could be something we could use?
For facilities?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead,
So, I believe what you're saying is we've been able to take the merger incentive aid. We've not spent that. Instead, we put that in our reserves, and we've chosen to put a majority of that in our facilities reserve. So, like, for example, the roof right now, that is being paid for out of that reserve. So,
That's a different point.
yeah.
Very different, yeah.
So I think your point is there money still in that facilities reserve that could be used support this? The answer to that is yes, I do plan on continuing to put money into that, but we also have spent a little bit of money out of there as well.
He will receive that for another 9 years, is that right?
Yep, so 15 years total. This was the first year where, so we've already received 50% of that money, and over this year included, for the next 10 years or next 9 years, receive the next 50% with a reduction of 10% a year, a reduction of $60,000 roughly per year. So yes, we do continue to receive that.
And the other question I had was, so we're saying X amount of dollars to do the recommendations in the building commission survey. We're not, I assume we wouldn't go through the next however many years before whatever we decide happens. It's not like we're going to stop doing maintenance. I assume that we do projects, each year. I'm guessing that we keep maintenance up or.
Well, I think you keep maintenance up to the work that you've done, and it kind of is like the roof now, right? I mean, you had to do the roof. If you don't, which I don't recommend, don't do anything for a few years, I think you have to do the ventilation stuff and the mechanical units and the boiler and things like that. That'd be my recommendation. Obviously, up to the district. If you decide to wait to do anything, you're gonna have to make some I think you have to make some short-term decisions, yes. Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I misunderstood. When we said aid, I misunderstood the question versus how that revenue is getting controlled. So I apologize. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to change the topic just a little bit, but it has to do with dealing with people of my age.
Older than me?
Older than me. But I know Josh and some of you others are very upset over the 90% aid that you thought was coming to them, which was in the earlier merger study. And you're very upset about that. And I agree, I can agree with that, but again, they did say during that presentation that it was only for school educational purposes. Now I'm going to go back to that same document. In that document, it said that staff would go down through attrition. So you're going to have to at some point answer to what was it then and what is it now?
Yeah, I mean,
I think you're going to have to answer that.
Yeah, so we have absolutely attrition in some positions. There's no doubt about that. However, the best space to talk about this is the mental health needs with the additional counselors, school psychologists, and bringing in some of those additional services.
I'm not asking you to answer that now.
Yeah, but my point being, we have definitely attrition positions, but we've also added positions.
Right.
So
that was a promise. That was a promise then.
Yeah.
And you didn't keep it.
Well, we
I don't, I understand what I just walked through the building and you and I haven't.
Yeah.
On what's going on, but you need to be prepared to answer that.
Sure.
So let's go ahead.
I am not familiar with the fields from Elizabethtown.
The whole terrace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are they sufficient for somebody who knows?
You can put two
those-
soccer fields on. I don't know if you get it.
Your baseball diamond, we got.
But they wouldn't be funded at all because they're not.
No, I understand that, but they exist already.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's water.
Right,
You
but
do a
my
little
question
bit
is,
more
are
for
they,
They have to, I do know that athletic fields have to meet a certain standard if we're gonna have other teams come in and play on them.
They have to have restrooms built there.
They do. There are restrooms.
Well, no, you would have to build, there would have to be something built there. You'd have to put some money into it.
So in speaking to the athletic director that's been there 30 years, he indicated that some of the most accomplished, committed, and passionate soccer players from Elizabethtown for the last 35 years have been crunching the numbers on fields from Lewis to Elizabethtown and the outskirts. And he said during that time, whether it be Smitty Marvin or Matt Morris or any other folk that was involved with this process, Paul Bueller was very, very adamant about the fact that at the end of all of those different wranglings, all of those different 15 years, 10 years, 30,
we're at Dudley because that's the best spot right now to play. And there was never a conclusion or never a decided upon spot in Lewis or these fields that Darlene is talking about. Right now, there's a bridge out that allows you to not get to those fields unless you go through the Egglefield Ford parking lot. So it wouldn't have been real good for this year because we haven't been able to get there. But the fields would need a considerable amount of work. You'd almost have to remove the hockey rink and whatever else is there and redo that whole space, and it's still not contiguous. But I do know, and it's not me that did this, but I do know, again, some of these folks that are way more passionate, way more committed, way more accomplished in those sort of sports in their time have never really been able to come to a consensus about any of those fields being able to be played upon.
I think it's small, you limited parking.
It's not
Limited.
ideal.
Yeah.
It's more like a gravel pit with some stuff.
I mean, it's a flat surface.
So let's keep talking about solution set. Again, let's just rehash. One is if we just only do rentals, we have to evaluate where we can put the garage on what we have left, where we can put a garage and where we can put fields. Don't be surprised if Throw Dam is part of that solution without a school on it.
Could you guys?
Because it's still a parcel, a great parcel to do that work on. We know where the utilities are, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry,
Could someone come up with a reason why we can't use the county property that's back here? I mean, can they do a survey on it and see if it?
I don't know if anybody's talked to, I don't know what's been done up to this point.
So
Go ahead, Josh.
we did, and this is going back, how many, I'm gonna say 5 years, it might be 4, whatever it was when we were doing that, they were not, at that time, they were not really willing to entertain conversation about the fairgrounds that are adjacent, but the other land in the back, they were willing to have those conversations.
I mean, maybe the terrain doesn't allow it, but I mean, then it's continuous and it's able.
If you renovate this building.
If you end up renovating this building, which.
But that is part of the puzzle too.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, everyone drives, a lot of it drives the other piece. Yes.
I just want to say that in your presentation, it talks about at the very end, your
Yes,
solution.
as a
It talks
solution.
about renovating the other building. It does not talk about renovating. this building.
It should say both.
It says both, but then it talks about moving the elementary to the other building.
No.
Well, it would be the vice versa.
There's more space.
Yeah.
There.
Absolutely.
Yeah, only because of the space, which is why the renovation
Right.
costs are more.
Right.
But it should go unsaid that it's renovate either or. And that's the financial solution that was out there earlier that we talked about too. Yeah, renovations to Mountain View or Lakeview.
Right, but then if you continue, it says that.
Yeah,
initially,
there would be the
renovating
addition there,
Or
yes.
Lakeview campuses, but then it says to accommodate the elementary grade levels on an existing campus
Yes.
will require an approximately whatever addition. But then it talks about that impacts the playing fields and the leach field.
Right, because
So that's talking about
we've
Mountain.
never talked about this county property option. That was based on just the information that we have. You know, if this county property option is, you know, to stay here and redo all this at cost of 10 million more beyond renovation of the other one, yes, you're gonna get $8 out of $3 million worth of fields. But you're spending that, no, you won't, because you're already over the MCA, so you're probably not gonna get, you're gonna get a field anyway. Because you're already over the MCA on that.
That one was almost 10 million more than the.
Yeah, it's 10 million, it's 10 million more to renovate here.
In the future, though, I think it would come into play. I come from a town where the athletic fields have been separate from the school district, and it's been a big issue whenever they've wanted to make improvements. They haven't had full control over the fields, and they actually just approved a project to put in a turf field that's multi-use, so they don't have to rely on shared fields with their township. It's it's a good idea that's been brought up, but there's pros and cons to that, just like anything else.
It's gotta be, that needs to be part of the solution, is they have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
They're still gonna have to go somewhere. No matter how you slice the pie, the fields are gonna have to go somewhere. Because you're gonna lose, if you renovate, I mean, you're gonna lose everything back there.
Put that first garage, wherever you put that.
We would have to look, that's part of it too. That's at the top of the list of what we need to find out is if you renovate there, the garage has to go somewhere and the wheels have to go somewhere. But like I said, the first parcel that would fit is where we looked at before, just with no school on it. We know where the infrastructure is, we know where it fits, and we know what it will cost, and we know we can get it. So basically, you can end up in the same place with no school there.
But you'd have the cost of like taking kids to the.
Yeah, you have to, but there's always, no matter where you go, we're busing them over to, what is it, a couple months, Dudley, which is down the road from here too, anyway, from over there. So I think you're gonna have transit that are how you slice the pie.
Somebody mentioned pros and cons earlier. Like, there are pros and cons of the Mountain View campus being renovated. There are pros and cons of the Lakeview campus being renovated. I always found it difficult after sorting through all of the different pros and cons for each to really figure out a way from within to pick one, because they all got very intertwined. And so the other part of that, and we haven't really talked much about this, but symbolically, in addition to the factual parts of the actual buildings and what's good or bad for each, symbolically, the idea of picking the former ELS building or the former Westport building, also, I would be lying if I said that that didn't trip me up a little bit as well. So the idea of a neutral site that could be built upon years and generations to come as a Boquet Valley versus Westport or Elizabethtown, that wasn't my leading charge, but that was part of, after sorting through the multiple pros, multiple cons of each, was, damn, how do you choose?
And experience in history is kind of dull. If you just scroll through the state of West, look for the schools with the hyphens, right? It used to be, when they were merging in the 50s, right? Mergers go back forever, right, Josh? Forever. But in the 50s, when they created central school districts and a lot of these other things, you get they were all hyphen schools, like in Western New York, right? Niagara Wheatfield, Mount Niagara, kind of Wheatfield merged in the 50s. And they still have the elementary schools, all of these places. If you go through and look at that, that is not, I'll speak to you guys with more experience, I mean, if you see that and look around historically, where that Newport, Lewiston Port, Town of Lewiston, Town of Porter moved, both have their elementaries, right? This goes back generations. Now, they are cohesively one, but it was always, especially, to have a presence. That's just how the cards always fell. If you don't have unification, like close to Richmondville. Close Richmondville, put a beautiful campus, problem solved, right? And they are the quintessential unity, I think, in my time, right? As old as I am, that's my most familiar with merger, because I was teaching out in Otsego County in the early 90s. But when and you could see it right off 88, and when they did that, Sam Chabon, when they did that merger, that was really just all the points you raised of merging of all of the sense of the culture of the districts together. And they got the elementary school originally closed because it was just so under enrolled, but there was a lot of energy behind that piece, right? But they didn't have this Coastal Richmond though. So sometimes, depending on the size, you still see, especially elementary, merge with the village, it's supposed to Boston spot. We're never going to close the Malfab Elementary Schools. The original high school was built in 1901. We spent $20 million gut renovating 19,000 square feet. It was the original high school. It wasn't going anywhere. They had to raise the building and redo all the limestone. We had to bring in, for starters, because the whole building was falling down. All that was left was a room like this. They built the whole school inside of it. It was really cool. It was $20 million for 16,000 square feet. But that's where the value was. And I appreciate that 1,000%, right? But there was the sense that building was never, and I fell into that project. There was the project before I started there failed miserably because they wanted to close that school. And my perspective was, what we want to do is what the community wants to do. There was no, we're saving the school, and if it's $19 million to renovate 16,000 square feet, then that's what it's going to be. So that's the project we did. And you're never not having the school in the middle of that village. You see that merged districts, you see that in other districts, you see it everywhere, right? And then that comes down to community, and comes down to the culture of the district, But if you do one or the other, you're making that decision. I think you need to know that among the committee. I think that's just a really good point, right? If you renovate one and not the other, you are making. There's no question about that. No question.
It almost would seem that the big questions we have to resolve in order to get our next step.
Right, and then it's really the question, candidly, because, you know, so if you do say, oh, we're gonna renovate a little because it's less expensive to do it there than it is to do here, the reality is you're still closing here. I had in 2008, I had to close, and it was Livingston Middle School in Albany, because 15 years before that, when they started all those projects, they ran out of money. So I was in a room with 10 trillion times the people. This, I had to tell them I'm closing the only middle school in Arbor Hill. So they ran out of money, right? Tough meeting, real tough meeting. But the reality was they made a decision to be on the south side and the west side of the city and close that school. And it was tough sledding. That's only the schools. I mean, but in the city, the schools, the community, right? I mean, there's 18 schools, right? So that school was that part of the city, and it's no different. I mean, it's just bigger questions that you know is the committee is going to have, you know, speaking of having answers, and right, wrong, or different, it's still the recommendation that you come forward with, and your decisions to recommend that. But that's the question: is it why or the other? Maybe it's a fiscal question. Well, it's another $10 million that we renovate here, as opposed to, right? I don't have that answer, but I think that's something that when you're doing one or the other, you are inherently making that decision. When you were going to new, the decision was you're doing neither. Right? Exactly. But I think that's part of the pieces too. And I know Josh is going to yell at me because now it's 20 after 8. So we are going to, I'd like some more input to help guide the team. We're going to go through parcels and just see where can we park the garage and where can we do the fields if those are, if we end up renovating one place or another. Anything else you want homework on, or do we just want to just do nothing but, I'll do some outline slides and just continue hashing things out in December.
And I thought we were also going to look at parcels that have become available for.
Yes, and we'll, as part of that, we will we'll get with your real estate person or something else to see if there's anything. Yes, it's part of that process. Absolutely.
Josh, who was the firm that did the last building survey in 2020?
Point was BVCSD.
Did that one also?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to do that one probably before you started the other project.
Yeah, that was, 2020.
Any other thoughts on direction? I mean, I could just do a rough sketch of an outline of kind of a summary, a few slides of where we are again, and just have conversation around decision. But I want you to be thinking in the back of your head too, when do you want to do something? Like the window's closing for, you make some decisions in the next few months. I think you can do a fall project. But you're not going to do, I don't think you're going to do anything in the spring right now. And the fall will be pushing, like you can make some decisions, you know, sooner than later. You could probably do a vote in the fall.
Could we look at also what can be cut? How can we reduce the size of the new building? How can we reduce the size of the, if we can we, and if so, how do we reduce the size of the additions?
Same project, less scale. So let's look at the addition, which I think is pretty straightforward, but we'll look at it. We'll look at the addition and we'll look at scaling back the original new building. Regardless of where it lands. We'll try to come to some scale on what a new building would be.
Right.
And when you look at a new building,
Got that, Sam?
when you're looking at a new building, what's the lifespan that we're shooting for? What are we?
Usually it's minimally, like it's systems, 30 years, 20 to 30 years. It's systems, mechanicals, roof. You know, but to the point that was raised earlier, you're doing good maintenance on it. You know, you can extend that just like everything else. Just like everything else. But the bones
A new building site would also affect the building
What's
layout
that?
too. A new building site would affect the building layout. So if we find a site that's flat and if we come up with a more efficient building for circulation, you know, with the with the previous site, it was working with some slope and it was a different form than we might see.
Yeah,
if it's
elevation
closer to
drives
the-
site costs.
Yeah,
big
so if we
time,
could,
yeah.
we could bring it back as much as we could on paper, but and then if we find a site that works, we might have to bring it, expand it.
But we
Program
can, let's look at the
space-wise.
program part. We'll pair, we'll sharpen the pencils. Yeah.
And again, that comes down to, I know part of that was, as you said, Jim, needs versus wants, and faculty needs versus wants. And I, as I said, I think when that project came, or when the drawings came through for the renovations to Mountain View, there were things that many of us thought we could have scaled back on.
But then does that play into like, do we need to have less talent coming here to teach? Like, if we have-
Well, that's a good question too, Josh.
Because we've got to have a good work environment, right?
That's a good question too. There's gotta be, but there's gotta be a middle ground.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Can I throw an option out there?
How long do you want to stay here?
No, this is for my own, they're gonna hate me, but this is, I'm working, whatever, I'm working through it enough. If you're getting 11 million in aid in elementary numbers, you're getting 8 million in aid, 7 million in aid in special ed numbers, you're getting 18 million all day in aid for elementary and special ed. What if you did, even if you took half that special ed, 3.5 million, 14.5 million. What if you went back and did an elementary school with special ed classrooms, you max the aid out, you do the garage and the fields at the same site. So now you drive down the out of pocket on the new construction, you're getting aid on fields, and then you're gonna have to decide how you wanna renovate your space, and you don't have to do the addition. So again, I'm purely numbers, no other conversation. I know you're getting, whatever, it's Sunday. You're getting 11 million plus or minus for elementary.
Could you tear down part of this building and put it here?
What's that?
Could you tear down part of this building and put it here? Instead of remodeling it?
I don't think anything prohibits it. Thoughts on that, Aaron?
Keep the gym and then tear down the rest of it and.
You could tear down of an existing building with hazardous materials is costly.
Yeah, to demo this would be brutal. So again, purely numbers, right? And you've got, like what we said, dude, there's 9 sections, right? PKK, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 16 sections, 880 square feet of classroom, 16,000 feet of classroom space, plus the other, what, 15% circulation, 20% circulation?
Yeah, 15 to 20 plus all the
Seven,
mechanical.
yeah, plus
space.
mechanical spaces, 17.
Plus the
You're
cafeteria, plus
17,000,
an
another
auditorium.
20%, 34, you're 20 and change, plus a gym, plus et cetera. You're at 30 to, I think it's no more than a 35, whatever. Back in the napkin, 35,000 square foot building. You know you're going to generate, you put all the sped there, you'll be further ahead. You put half the sped there, fine. You know you're going to generate almost 15 million in aid on 35,000 square foot building. You're going to have the fields of the garage there. If that turns into a real low out of pocket, you're saving your local cost. You cut the addition for secondary, so you're taking that 30,000 square foot addition right out of your cost. See what that number was. You might be getting closer to a $26 million MCA. Maybe it becomes I don't know what it becomes. But again, this is just.
Thank you. Good point for consideration.
Yeah.
Thank you. Brainstorming, look at the numbers. I always look at how am I maximizing aid. I don't care if I'm buying pencils or if I'm building buildings. How am I maximizing aid? How many people am I sending BOCES? Am I doing it this way? Am I doing it this way? If I can get 82% versus 74%, why am I not making a decision to get 82? Now, we would have to look at, like I said, they're going to hate me because we're going to figure this out, but what is that space and the scale of that space? But again, we already know it's 16 from your drawing. That's why I want to make sure you have a big copy of those drawings. You can see the elementary and the secondary. You got 16 classrooms, you're going to have ancillary spaces. Now, I'm telling you right now, you're not putting an Olympic gym in there. You're not doing any of these other stuff. We're not doing a 1,000-foot auditorium, right? You need to think about, we're doing a school, which is gonna be amazing learning spaces for kids. And it's not gonna have a gym like this, but it's not gonna have a gym where we're hosting sectionals, right? That's a real important part of scale, because no, why not? You're spending the money anyway. You know, you might as well go back to your point, the other piece. Now, the difference was when you had the combined build project that went down, you were accounting for those spaces being married, right? Which is why I think they were generous. And now if something like this came to fruition, we'd also have to lean on them to honor the A values too. But I think this is reasonable. The project has changed.
We can modify the unaidable portions of the school space, we'll pare it down even more.
You're paying, remember, when it's combined like that, it's exactly it. You're eliminating what you're not generating gain on. So you're cutting the project cost down that doesn't 90%. You're cutting the project down that's not receiving it. Exactly. Go through this all the time. We gotta have a pool, you gotta have, look, you can have whoever you want, but it's out of pocket. You know, we got the wrestling gym, we have the main gym, we have the pool, right? We got the auditorium, but we really wanted a balcony. Okay, knock your socks off. Right? I tell you guys, right? You do it all the time. And it's chick, 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 right? I'm thinking nuts and bolts. I know what this number is, right? I know this number. The cheapest thing to get into is an elementary school. Most cost effective. That's the reality of it. That's why it's aided the way it is. 27 kids, classroom, call it a day. You're not getting fancy. It's an elementary school. It's not a chemistry lab, right? It's not a project lead the way space where you're building stuff. It's an elementary school. Right? We do a nice library. We try to do media center. We try to generate as much as we can out of that space. Maybe do something cool and connect it to something else, but you maximize the aid.
PE space, aidable?
PE,
Yeah.
yes, by numbers of enrollment, if I remember correctly.
But is it a, I'm just trying to remember from before, is it a lower
Yes.
number,
Yes.
right?
Yes, it's students per square foot is how it goes, if I remember correctly.
And then my only other comment is, and I like this idea, I'd like to investigate that. What it does do, Joe, by not putting everybody together, is that you are still duplicating some services that we will have to continue to pay for. You'll still have two cafeterias, you will still, you know.
No question. I think that
custodial staff, you'll still.
you will
know,
definitely.
all those things that.
100%.
To Sam's point, all those things that we thought were going to lose, some by attrition and some by merger in one building, those advantages are gone.
There's no question about it. And I know that's in there somewhere. It's inefficient. You're in two places, it's always inefficient. You're in three, it's more inefficient than two. There is no question. Again, this is a numbers, that's my eyes on a numbers game. You know, I've been thinking about it and thinking about it. And I said, it also goes back down to, is it money or is it site or is it right? Because if we look at this, I would put it right where we were before and you say, well, that's a bad site. Now we got to try to find somewhere else. But if they estimate it there, we already know what infrastructure is going to cost. We've already got the garage there. We already got the fields there, right? So give me a 16 station building with 6 special ed classrooms and common spaces and call it a day and run numbers out and see what it looks like. And I know I have in my pocket on the low end, 11 and 3.5, 14.5 million. And if you do all the sped there, it's 18 million. 18 million costs you 20 million to build a school. It's a $2 million school. With the fields, with the garage.
Plus the renovations to the Mountain View campus to make the rest of the program acceptable.
Yeah. But you can make that up by now. You're not doing the addition there now. You're saving all the costs in the addition. You're doing strictly rentals. Now you have to run the numbers because the borrowing is going to be different on that stuff. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves either. But I want everyone to think. So when we come in December, you know, I'm trying to stir the juices a little bit. And I think, you know, being creative is a cool way to approach it.
I have one more question.
Go right ahead.
The information on this map that is here at the bottom, that is unreadable, is it possible to get that in a size that we can actually look
We
at?
can send you the PDF and you can blow it up as much as you want. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Jack, you make a note of that,
For the
make
other
sure we-
building as well.
What's it? Yeah. And you'll get the after the holiday, everybody needs a break next week. You'll get the minutes. You will get the notes. Josh, when do we meet again? My last slide, which I can't get to.
Is it December 17th?
Yeah, and it's a quick turnaround.
Joe, in essence, for what you just described as this sort of ultimate scale down of projects, if you're on the scale down, and I think it's great to think outside the box, I think it's gonna be our solution at some point. But I hope that we didn't lose sight of that one little tidbit from last meeting, which we talked about. In a scaled down version of the school we proposed, that didn't pass. We also just dabbled with this idea that we have to build a school that houses the people and the programs that are gonna be left only after the merger aid ends and the COVID, money ends. So anything that we're getting now that happens to be short-term or temporary, we should not be building spaces into a new school for those things that are not going to be here by the time the school's built.
Yeah, and I think
that I hope
this
is still
solution,
on that scale
yes.
down piece, right?
But that's why I think this solution is one of the solutions. That's why I like this kind of scale down, because I'm not fighting the scale down with the special spaces. It doesn't get more, like I said, there's nothing more straight ahead than an elementary school. It's kids in classrooms. Like I said, you could do something, you do the media center has a little bit, do some technology and some different things. But the reality is, you walk down the elementary school, it's kids in classrooms. It's the high school that, and all of a sudden it's like, well, why did you need the 30,000 square foot maker space when there's no kids in that club? That's where I think you're
Could you build the elementary school with that project and leave a space for an addition down the road if the enrollment did drop and you had to abort or abandon the one additional high school?
You can do this, you can do anything.
Right. I mean, it could be at least something to go with in 20 years if things went the other direction.
Yeah, and that gets tough, and a lot of times, conversation, I won't speak for the design team, but I've heard a million times. Well, you build the first floor strong enough, so we move to the second floor, so we can do anything we want, right? Big time, absolutely. We just went through another project there, the way the structural steel was, you end up, and this happens everywhere, a beam off center in the middle of Gene. Can you move the beam? Sure we can. You can do anything. Right? Absolutely, you can move the beam. You can move the beam, you can build the rooms, you can speculate, we can do anything we want. My thinking for that suggestion was, I know how much, I got $100 in my pocket, right? I know what I'm going shopping for the $100. How close can I get? Right? If I'm at 150, it's never going to happen, right? But that $100, that's that share, taxpayer share on $105, $5, right, or whatever, as an analogy. Then you dump the Mountain View renovations right now. That project's at 53 million, right? If you take down, we look real closely at those renovations, and you take out that addition. Remember, you're 31 million MCA there. That becomes that becomes a mid-30s, I don't know, I'm speculating, that becomes a mid-30s project, and you got a low 20s project over there. Even if you're 10 million over, that's less than you were before.
I will just chime in that the aid for only additions or only renovations at Mountain View, the MCA is probably 14 to 16 million.
We look at.
Just so that's happening.
Yeah, because the BAUs are driving the.
Yeah, the renovation and addition aid made 36 million, so it's probably 14 to 16.
But if we come back, that might be something we can talk to state ed about too. Look, we're not,
I think we
gave us the BAUs on the new space. Let's have a conversation about what you can do for us on Reynolds on a new project. I don't know. Again, just thinking differently, but we need to do this to move the ball down the field. We all have to agree with that, right? Or we can keep talking about what ifs. So December, we're moving the ball down the field. The more you do, and if you have to teach, right? Did you stay past here? Did you have to work tonight? No. What? Did you have to work tonight? I'm sorry, you stayed up. I don't know if you had to leave.
work last night. I already moved my class.
Did you? Good. Thank you for staying. I appreciate it. Glad you could make it time. So we're moving the ball down the field in December. We'll do a little homework on the other sites, but I need everybody to come and think about, okay, let's really get to the problem solving and the real issues. Like if you're fixing one school, remember, you're not going to be fixing the other, or you can't fix both because you're not good at it. Like, we need to agree we're not going 41 million in. Right. I want to speak for everybody on the committee, but I hope we can start. Let's get that off the table there. You're not fully renovating 2 sites to the tune of $41 million.
That might necessitate that meeting that I spoke of before, where we're more interactive.
That's what December is. Yeah, absolutely.
Without Yeah, well, you're also talking about, let's, kick the ball down the field.
That'll help. No, I'm sorry.
That'll get us set up for January.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come, like I said, I'll just have a few lines about outline questions that'll kind of guide that discussion. But the more we think about, and the knowing, like I said, these holistic questions of you renovate one, you're not gonna renovate them both. And that is, why, if you come to one decision or the other, how you get there. Okay? Great, so after the holiday, I'll get you the minutes and the other drawings. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just don't want false things.
So draw a box that costs $20 million. That's your homework. What's that?
Yes. So that's what I tried recording.
Before we get there.
Can we,
And no way to set it up as a Zoom.
no, yeah, so I think that I can do that. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
All right, so
I feel like
Yeah,
there's
please.
so much happening.
Yeah, feel free to send me a reminder. Yeah, I will find it to send. Okay. No.
All right, thank you.
Maybe you do a stagflation over all right.
Yeah, but now you know. And sometime I'm in Buckner.
Did you say wait? Taylor Walker, BCA.
That's what I thought. I was like, I think that's the Salmon River Day. That's where you are? That's so cool. Like, I hear it there. Yeah. On Monday or Tuesday. I'd love to show up. Yeah. Very nice. It's never something like I try to